Mauricia and Hella, two automotive leaders, have come together. Stronger. We are much more than a global leader. We inspire the future of mobility.
Opportunity here in Michigan is really about the people.
People here want to work hard, they want to win, and they're used to creating industries that change the world.
From engineering talent to marketing talent, these are hard workers that are, hungry to innovate.
There is just an ethic of hard work that says we can kind of deal with anything.
The kind of teams that we build here and the kind of people that we find here are folks that are in it for the long haul.
Distinguished guests, welcome to the 2022 MICHauto Summit, presented by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Barua.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. It is awesome to see you here. Welcome to the MICHauto Summit. We are absolutely delighted that you would take time from your incredibly important and hectic schedules to spend time with MICHauto today. We're delighted to have you, and what an amazing time to be a part of the global mobility industry. I mean, this industry is so exciting. We're so excited to be a part of it. It changes and improves every day. Every day is different in this dynamic industry, and we are just so delighted that you are helping to lead the revolution of what is happening with personal and goods mobility across the planet right here in Michigan. So give yourselves a hand for the incredible work that you all do. Well, on behalf of MICHauto and the Detroit Regional Chamber, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you today Michigan's Chief Executive Officer. Perhaps no governor in our history, with perhaps the exception of the Civil War and the Great Depression, has faced more challenges than Gretchen Whitmer. A historic dam failure, multiple 100-year floods in multiple parts of our beautiful state, a global chip shortage that disproportionately impacted our homegrown mobility industry, an overdue social awakening focused on social and racial justice, a global pandemic that paralyzed the planet with no known game plan, and of course, the continued erosion of civility, the acceleration of disinformation, and all of the factors that led to the shocking and frankly gross kidnapping attempt and the threats to the governor and her family. Through all this, Gretchen Whitmer persevered. She retained her sunny optimism. It was a little bit like carry on and keep a big smile. Now, perhaps not every person agreed with every decision during these unprecedented times, but no one can disagree with any of the following. First, Gretchen Whitmer never passed the buck. She took action and she addressed challenges and made decisions oftentimes from a set of less than ideal options. Second, when confronting the pandemic, she always put people and public health first. Given that protecting people, protecting the safety of people is the #1 job of our elected officials, Gretchen Whitmer did her duty. And in spite of the unprecedented nature of the challenges over the last 4 years and the historical trends of what happens to a president's party in his, and one day hers, first midterm election, Governor Whitmer sailed to re-election with one of the strongest margins of any sitting governor in 2022. And Lord, she had coattails, bringing along majorities of her party in both chambers of the legislature. But perhaps of greatest importance to the Detroit Regional Chamber and MICHauto and this audience is that Governor Whitmer championed more robust tools to improve Michigan's business attraction and retention tools and supported our industry's move to electrification, critical for Michigan workers and the long-term competitiveness of the state of Michigan. Post-election, as we all look to the future, we will address the challenges we face addressing our educational attainment gap, more work we need to do to make Michigan more attractive to more job creators, and to seize our opportunities, especially around those building around our heritage of being the automotive capital of the world. And we are delighted, just days before Gretchen Whitmer is inaugurated to her second term as Michigan's Chief Executive Officer, she is here with us today at the MICHauto Summit to address Michigan's future in the future of mobility. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome someone I am proud to call friend, the Honorable Gretchen Whitmer.
Well, thank you, Sandy. I so appreciate that kind introduction, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you today in the beautiful city of Detroit. And I'm excited to announce new support for a key partner, MICHauto, as we advance Michigan's future mobility leadership. Through the Michigan Mobility Futures Initiative, we will invest $2 million in industry, infrastructure, and workforce projects right here in Michigan. These projects will help us build the workforce of the future, compete for high-skilled workers, and create good-paying jobs. In a state where 1 out of 5 jobs is mobility-related, these projects will leverage our greatest asset, our people, and make Michigan more competitive and improve the future of our economy and communities. As part of this program, we'll be working with MICHauto to support 2 types of projects. First, projects to reinforce our talent pipeline to help students move from K-12 education through college and into a good-paying career in the mobility and EV industry. These types of projects will increase student enrollment in STEM programs like FIRST Robotics, Square One Network, and BEX. They will speak directly to young Michiganders about potential careers in this sector. We want to make sure that they recognize that there are exciting opportunities in future mobility, and they are right here in the great state of Michigan. Second, we will be supporting projects that support MICHauto and its partners as they create more industry connectivity between our upper and lower peninsulas. Because we want to ensure that no matter where you live in the great state of Michigan, you have the same opportunities to build successful and in-demand IT and tech careers. By staying focused on the fundamentals, we are growing our economy and building a brighter future here in Michigan. We worked across the aisle to enact economic development legislation to ensure that Michigan competes for manufacturing projects in every region. And we've announced 30,000 auto jobs since taking office. And in the last year, we have secured investments from General Motors, Ford, LG Energy Solution, Wacker, Pfizer, SK Siltron, KLA, Hemlock Semiconductor, and more. We are focused on winning when it comes to sciences, when it comes to electrification, and of course, building batteries and semiconductors. We are fostering an environment where EVs are made, tested, and deployed here in Michigan. With our multi-billion-dollar surplus and economic momentum, our commitment to empowering our hardworking people, and our drive to compete for every mobility job, we are showing the world, and they are taking notice, that Michigan is the best place to build the future. I, for one, look forward to working with all of you and continuing to put our foot on the accelerator as we see this historic transition and the huge opportunity in front of us. When we work together, we are going to be successful. And I say, let's get it in gear and throw the foot on the accelerator. I'm looking forward to continuing this work with all of you, and I thank you for having me this morning.
We're going to keep the governor for just one more second here.
Like the legend of the Phoenix.
Okay, thank you, Governor. I do want to underscore something that some of you heard me say before. 2 years before she announced that she was running for governor, probably about a year before she announced, she actually sought out myself and Tom Anganello, who founded MICHauto, who's here with us today, and we sat down because she wanted to know what was going on in the auto industry and what this mobility transformation was. So that was a few years ago. And they have carried forward with that. So I, again, compliment the governor and her team and thank them for being here and part of that announcement. So I want to set the stage a little bit today. But before I do that, I want to thank a few folks because we can't do this today without our support and our investors. Number one are those of you, and we have a lot of companies that support our work that are here today. And I really want to sincerely appreciate on behalf of the automotive or MICHauto team to our investors. Thank you. Also to our sponsors, the MEDC, I'm looking to see where tables are. The MEDC team and the Office of Future Mobility, thank you for all you do. The CGI team from Montreal, Pittsburgh, and Detroit is here with us. Bernie, thank you to your team. Michigan State University, go green. There we go. Thank you to you and your team. Walker Miller, Carla, and your team, thank you so much. Ford, we really appreciate the engagement we have with Ford on an everyday basis. And Forvia, Misty and her team and their management team, we've been very engaged with them, particularly on the talent pipeline. Thank you. And then Rami and his team at Fakuri Global Immigration, they are our go-to when it comes to issue and policies with regards to immigration, which is going to continue to be a bigger and bigger issue for us. And lastly, to Warner, back to Tom Manganello and the team there for supporting us. So thank you to the sponsors. So let me set the stage a little bit, and I'm going to take you back. This was the headline in the Wall Street Journal on July 8th, 2014. I remember it vividly, and I remember getting some calls that day, and we said, not if we have something to do with it, right? And that's what we've been working on. So this mobility word was starting to work its way, and now it's the most overused word. No, it's the change that was upon us and we're in the middle of right now. And when you hit an inflection point, everybody knows, you have two chances. You can't force your way through it. And I think in Michigan, we've historically wanted to force our way through change, but you can't do that. So how do we take the upward trajectory? That's been our challenge. So we formed an initiative. Yes, another initiative. But this one was special because these 5 organizations met every month for about 18 months. The leaders of these organizations sat down and we plotted a course for these 4 areas. These were the 4 areas we focused on. These are the 4 areas really the state still focused on. And they're the most important areas when you look at projects, positioning, people, and policy. And when you came to the mobility transformation, we didn't have a lot in those quadrants. But I can tell you today, we do. All of these things happened since then, starting with M-City, but carrying forward to today, and they keep happening. So the message is tremendous progress has been made by this state with regards to making sure we solidify ourselves as an automotive capital, but making sure we advance as a mobility leader. There's 2 major drivers right now. Yes, there are other ones, but the major drivers, and everybody knows this, are digitalization and sustainability. Everything is really revolving around this. Talent is deeply enmeshed in these two areas. So let me put it in the context of General Motors. Everybody remembers January 25th, this significant announcement about an investment in advanced manufacturing for the electrification of the vehicles that they build and the supply chain. Absolutely essential announcement. But what you might not know, some of you heard me talk about this, and this was the announcement. And again, I want to just underscore the fact that we have 12 assembly plants in Michigan. 3 of them have kind of moved directly into the electrification space. But as this evolves, and the curve will be slow, some places it'll be fast, but we need to make sure that these assembly plants are continuing to run, continuing to have products of the future, and the supply chain that goes around them that the governor talked about too. But this was the other announcement the day after. A little more subtle, but it was made on LinkedIn from Mary Barra's account. And her post was, "We are building the all-electric future and hiring for 8,000 new tech roles to create software and services beyond the vehicle." 8,000 high-tech workers. That's literally the graphic that they posted on LinkedIn the day after. See where we're at? Foot in the present and how it's evolving, an eye to the future and what's going to be required for a corporation. And you can take any size company and just about any industry, because people frequently say every company is a tech company now. So when you look at the skills and the people, I like to kind of put it in the context of 2 extremes that are all tied together. Your vehicle is just like an iPhone. Everybody knows this. The electronics and the digital content continues to proliferate. The amount of subscription services that are available as a market opportunity to the OEMs and suppliers is huge. But the factory floor is also extremely, extremely connected. Industry 4.0 and all of its advances and all the technologies. So factory floor to cloud. That's where this digital technical talent is required. So challenges and opportunities. Yes, we have sobering numbers, and I'm not showing you anything you haven't seen, except for maybe that last one. 41st in labor force participation, 25th in educational attainment, and this is one we're really watching because students get life skills and life counseling from counselors, but they get career path counseling too. And if we're 47th in the country when it comes to that, that's something that's got to be fixed. The national average is 450 to 1. The recommendation is 251. We are at 638 students to 1 counselor in our schools. Population. We are not a growing state. But we're not only not a growing state, we're not an inbound migration state because of that. We're an outbound migration. We're very high on the outbound list. So again, talent attraction and retention. The other thing I want to underscore is where the competition is. People say, well, are you worried about Silicon Valley? And what about Silicon Valley or Shanghai or Stuttgart or Seoul? All the above. But it's actually next door. Ohio has a major tech initiative called Ohio X. They've invested in startup companies through the Third Frontier. There's a tremendous investment there. When you look up in Ontario in what they call the corridor between Toronto and Waterloo, it's all AI, it's all high tech, it's all software development. So the competition is global, but it's also next door. So what's the opportunity? And that's where this leads into the conversation today. Building on that advanced engineering, manufacturing, testing, and design heritage is absolutely critical for us. But enabling our citizens with digital skills is absolutely going to be the lifeblood of our future. At the same time, fostering an entrepreneurial community, you're going to hear about that today. And it all has to be underpinned by strong communities that are built on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It has to be. We have to be a welcoming state in those areas. So that quadrant, people, that's where we're focused. That's where almost everybody in this room is focused because we know it's the most important area. Not minimizing the others, but that is the most important. So, to tee it up and turn it over, we've formed a different conversation today. First of all, we have a table, kind of like how you sit around the kitchen table, instead of the kind of traditional chairs. We want you to hear from some people why they're doing what they're doing, what they think is important. Why do they live in Michigan? Why do they think inclusion is an opportunity for us, more so now than ever? So these are the people that you're going to hear from today. We're looking forward to it. It's going to be a good day. It's going to move fast. Thank you all for being here today.
The next session of the program is sponsored by Michigan State University. Please welcome the co-founder and president of the Song Foundation and a board member on the National Advisory Council on Innovation, Doug Song.
All right, good morning, everybody. All right, so I'm here to talk about a recipe for economic innovation, and we are truly in a global competition for that. As Glenn has said, it's not just next door, it is worldwide, and I'm just glad that we have a master chef like Glenn helping us. All right, so let me start with what the challenge here really is. So Glenn talked a little bit about sustainability and entrepreneurship. I'd like to offer to you that sustainability is really, in my opinion, the advancement of humanity. It's the why, but innovation and entrepreneurship are really the how. And at the end of the day, the point of any of this work is really to ultimately drive the economic well-being of our residents. And so that's what success for us, I think, needs to look like as we plot our strategies and figure out what we do next. But what does that look like? Well, in the simplest terms, you can look at average earnings, right, per resident. And in 1980, over half of the top 10 ranked metro areas in the US were here in Michigan. By 2016, Boston, New York, San Francisco, Seattle, San Jose, all jumped into that top 10, and we were knocked out. In fact, we're not even in the top 20 today. So this has really been driven by jobs in IT, in biotech, in financial services. And in the Fortune 500 today, 47 tech companies actually make almost as much as the 94 financial sector companies. So it's really been a big shift in the broader economic landscape. So what are the jobs then that we need to grow? And I would offer to you that we actually have this interesting challenge of being good at the big and good at the small, but having this missing middle of what I would call the early stage tech startups to the growth and scale stage tech startups. And the difference there is startups aren't just smaller versions of large companies. They're organizations that are built in search of a scalable business model. They might be small, but they don't want to be for very long, and especially not their investors. And so it's important here because these jobs actually create, or these kinds of companies create jobs at a faster rate than almost any other organizations out there. The old companies aren't actually creating net new jobs. In fact, almost all net new job creation you see comes from companies that are 5 years old or younger. And at the current churn rate, about half of today's S&P 500 will be replaced over the next 10 years. And if you listen to BCG, 75% of the Fortune 500 will be new in the next 10 years. And you just have to look at the past history of how that's evolved more recently with the advent of tech to see how that's going. And so the war for talent is actually a competition for entrepreneurial talent and skilled labor and knowledge workers to really drive these market disruptions. We want to be the leading side of strategic surprise, not subject to it. So how are we doing in the broader rankings of this today? Well, if you look at what Startup Genome, which is an organization that's been built to track all this stuff internationally, says in their rankings, of the top 30, none are in Michigan, even though roughly half of them are in the US. They're in places now like Singapore, London, Tel Aviv. But what does it take for us to get there? What are the ingredients to that kind of innovation and entrepreneurial success? Well, there are models of innovation hubs. This is by a Berkeley professor who's been studying this for many, many decades. But it's not that complicated. I mean, innovation is actually the commercialization of invention. Because it takes R&D to produce technology, but it takes people and capital that turn that technology into successful products and businesses. It also, though, it takes a village of support and actually a government to actually create the economic conditions for all this to work successfully. And the private sector, left to its own devices, cannot solve entirely for the income and opportunity gaps that we have in our country. And so as we think about where we stand amongst all the other metros in the US, and what the economic future of not just our state, but of our country looks like, we can recognize that there are actually many potential places where this kind of innovation can happen. And my company was actually the first unicorn, or over $1 billion valued venture-backed company here in Michigan. By now there are many more. And in most states, actually, there have been unicorns that have been created. But if we look across the country, there's actually over 100 different places where they have highly educated populations, they have strong universities, relatively low housing costs, easy commutes, that could all be these potential innovation hubs. And these represent about 36 states and are home to about 80 million Americans. This right now is the focus of a bunch of work that we're doing as part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, seeking to drive economic success for the country through technology innovation in ways that basically can beat China, right? Is sort of the subtext there. And this is because we're not the only ones who are thinking about this in this way. China is now the world's largest manufacturing economy and exporter of goods. It's also actually the fastest growing consumer economy and second largest importer of goods, with over 100 cities now that are over 1 million in population, or basically the size of Austin, Texas. And they're likely to double that number in the next decade. And this is more. These are more cities that are 1 million people and above than the US, Europe, and South America combined. And they've chosen to connect these dots, right, over these last couple decades with high-speed rail. They're spending hundreds of billions of dollars to do that. And again, in doing so, they're working to create special economic zones and working to, not only provide market access, but market integration to dominate entire industries. So we're now in this era of pretty much open and somewhat mutual antagonism, right, with China, an industrial partner and a market for us, but also now a competitor, always been a competitor. But they're not just reshoring. They're not just reshoring manufacturing jobs. That they're also losing to Vietnam and India and others. We have to reshore the advanced manufacturing jobs. And this has been the subject of a lot of the work that you've seen most recently from us in the EDA around investments toward semiconductor. So the CHIPS and Science Act, which I'll talk about here in a second, it's just crucial because these are the technologies that power everything from our phones and computers and vehicles to actually communications infrastructure, radar, missiles, military equipment. This has become an issue of national security, which is why you see us being so bold in a lot of this. And so how does that affect us here in Michigan? Well, as you think about the US strategy to drive a more competitive situation for the entire country, right? Not just the places where historically we've seen the winners take all the spoils, like the Valley or the coast. The CHIPS and Science Act, again, is $52 billion over 5 years, $11 billion of which is R&D, $39 billion of which is incentives. And you've seen some of that now land even in our area, although not necessarily here in Michigan. Right? Intel landed their plant, $20 billion plant, which will eventually grow to about a $100 billion investment in Ohio. Micron with their $40 billion plant in central New York. And there's work that we've done to prepare these regions to be able to better compete. So the Build Back Better Regional Challenge was $1 billion via the American Rescue Plan, some of which we did see. Michigan was one of 21 metros that was awarded was $52 million for the Global Epicenter of Mobility, a program that's been put together by the Davidson Foundation with the support of the DRP and many partners, including MICHauto and TechTown and so forth. But following on that work to really develop the ecosystem and then fund it, there's also the NSF engines, right, to go and develop more technology That's already been a $6.5 billion appropriation. The fund will be up to $160 million, really just for research. And so anyway, there's money coming here, but we have to get ready. And we have to be prepared because it is going to be a competitive situation for us, even just across the border. Thankfully, we have an administration and leaders who are focused on this. So with the refresh of the SSBCI program, it was a $10 billion via the American Rescue Plan, that we got allocated $236 million. We have $75 million going to VC and other things, but we have to focus in another place I want to talk more about, which is around what does it take to support the people who are driving the innovation that's next and creating the companies. Because those entrepreneurs are folks that also have choices about where they should go and where they should be. And if we think about this, we can look to other countries for examples of what folks have done. So for instance, the UK, they created incentives for individuals to go and invest in startups, as well as traditional fund-to-fund work and other seed funding. These are all things, for instance, that we've done here, but for instance, in places like Ohio, they've done much more of. And the impact of that has been pretty remarkable. Even in the UK, they basically created 20,000 angel investors who invested in 22,000 companies. Over 16 billion pounds they've raised, and it's become a sort of mainstream thing. You can find ads for crowdfunding in the tube, right? And the government knows that these jobs, investing in tech, drives the kind of jobs that they need. It creates them, attracts them, retains them. And there's more beyond this in terms of the other government ventures that they've got. But let's look at another example, which is Israel, which is much smaller, but the GDP that is far outscales kind of their size. Their main program for this was back in the 90s called Yozma, which was a direct and fund-to-funds investments. The thing that they did that was really smart here was that they insured 80% of the downside risk of investments in startups in the country, which encouraged a flood of outside capital to come in. And these are the kinds of things that I think we can be doing here in Michigan to, again, foster more investment, direct investment in our state. What that led to was a pretty remarkable shift in culture toward entrepreneurship. So even after the crisis in 2009, instead of pulling back, they doubled down on their entrepreneurs with their amount of funds. They created a minority fund, right, for minority businesses, like we should be doing, in my opinion, and created many other programs. And the impact of this is unbelievable. With fewer people in this country than in the state of New Jersey, they have more companies on the tech-oriented NASDAQ than any country outside the US. Actually, more than Europe, China, Japan, Korea, and India combined. They've become the startup nation in many respects and been very successful with it. I mean, even their $20 million Yozma fund, the 15 companies they invested in, 9 of them IPO'd, which is kind of unbelievable. And part of this is again, the work they did on their culture. They are very open to immigrants who are natural risk takers. They do have something of a shared experience of all the young folks going through not just college, but actually the military. It leads to a particular Israeli specialty around technological mashups, right? Finding technologies and many different things to do with them creatively. But another example is Singapore. So if we look at Singapore, this is a very small country, right? 5 million people, also with a remarkable GDP for that size, that has become truly the entrepreneurial hub for the region. I was just there a month ago, and whether you're a founder in Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, or even Hong Kong these days, you're probably domiciled actually in Singapore. So they've done an amazing job actually building their country into a startup nation as well, very aggressively. And again, the impact has been remarkable, right? As a tiny country, they are now the world's 12th startup ecosystem. with thousands of startups and significant exits. So what about us? So here in Michigan, with a population of 10 million, GDP of 568 billion, well, I'll say this, when it comes to people, right? Entrepreneurs, we've had 165 venture-backed startups, but in 5 years, only 70% growth of those. In terms of capital, right? 3.7 billion under management, but that's actually shrunk, right? Assets under management over 5 years. In terms of education, we're not actually keeping up with the national average, right, of residents with bachelor's degrees. And for those that do acquire them, we're losing them at a rate that is, again, higher than many other places. Long story short, we're not creating enough companies, we're not funding them, we're not educating enough people, and we're not keeping them. And this is even despite the fact that we have 47 VCs, 14 angel groups, 20 smart zones, 104 entrepreneurial support organizations. Our University Research Corridor is world class. U of M, MSU, Wayne State, they contribute $20 billion to our economy. Our grads represent 20% of our total state income. They start companies at twice the national rate. But again, we have to actually keep them to be successful. And so I think our priorities, as we think about what the recipe is for bringing these ingredients together to drive success that can be much larger, we need to fund more founder-led programs. We need to create more connectivity, right, of the founders who are actually building the industries of the future here. Because if the communities don't exist, they will go and find them elsewhere. And again, reinvest in our smart zones to do some of that. We should be reinvesting in our fund of funds. This is something that Michigan does not really do at a time where Ohio is really kicking our ass in terms of the amount of venture funding that places like Columbus are seeing relative to Detroit. And that's pretty straightforward. We've done it before, we know how to do it, and things like angel investing are really just a matter of tax policy. Education, huge kudos on Michigan Reconnect and a lot of things that have been done here in the state to create accessibility for everybody, right, to community college and so forth. But we have to actually restore our funding for higher education to what it was even back in 2000, right, where it was $1 billion more. We've cut all that. And finally, we have to restore our investments in our communities. So, the investments in cities and public infrastructure, regional transit. Regional transit is a huge issue. We're not going to get to, again, all the high-speed rail, for instance, that China's done, but we can at least connect, Ann Arbor to Detroit. And again, a lot of this just comes down to restoring the kind of revenue sharing that we used to have here that helped communities pay for services, police, fire, roads, water, sewage, garbage, all this stuff. It's actually in our state constitution. So, the history that I've experienced here, right, being an entrepreneur, going from 2 people in a co-working facility in Ann Arbor to ultimately 750 people in 8 years, and selling the company for $2.5 billion. Well, we grew that here for the most part, about 500 people between Ann Arbor and Detroit. But we expanded with a small sales office in Bay Area, a small sales office in London, and we ended up opening our major office, other than Michigan, in Austin, Texas. It was a city none of us had ever been to, but had heard about. In fact, we made a commitment to that before we even visited. It's kind of a millennial strategy, move somewhere and figure it out. But it's really based on place. And at the end of the day, so I'll leave you with 2 thoughts. One is that place matters. Place really matters. And this is made clear, actually, not just from my own experience, but what we all saw happen with the failed Amazon HQ2 bid, right? This is kind of a crazy thing that happened where all these cities were making appeals to Amazon for 25,000 jobs at an average of $150K salary. We offered a bunch of incentives. I think it was about $4 billion. Virginia was the one to beat us, right, offering less than $2 billion, and the majority of that, $1.1 billion, actually being investments in transit and education. And reportedly, Amazon told us that, simply we didn't have the talent they needed, and that they thought that our lack of transit and walkable urbanism meant we were unlikely to attract it. Now, there wasn't transit when we moved our office here to Austin either, But just last year, Austin voters approved a $7 billion proposition, Project Connect, for bus and rail across the city. And these are the kinds of things that we should be doing here. And we missed our chance here last with the RTA, but I hope that we can figure that out again. And part of this is also about culture. So this is a fellow, Sam Altman. If you know him, he was the president of Y Combinator, probably Silicon Valley's most successful accelerator, whose graduates have actually created more than $500 billion of enterprise value, roughly the entire GDP of the state of Michigan, right? And his quote, Silicon Valley works because there is such a high density of people working on startups, but more importantly, they're inclined to help each other. And again, what people get wrong about the Valley all the time is, oh, it's a very clubby kind of thing. You have to sort of know. It's not actually. Silicon Valley is where a bunch of random people show up from all around the world without any pre-existing connections, but they all come together to help each other. And I'll leave you with this thought that the real recipe for our success is around culture and connection to really build and drive our community and economy. Because connection is how people need an opportunity to find each other. But culture drives behavior, behavior drives results. And the kind of results that we can achieve here if we're successful at doing this, I think can go much broader than just financial wealth, right? The kind of community wealth that we can create will be financial, will be social, will be cultural, environmental, because the opportunity we have here uniquely to do it is to do it equitably, right? Detroit is a place where, again, I think we have so much tremendous opportunity to do things differently than we've seen them happen elsewhere. We've proven that, and I know we can do this if we go out of our way to help each other be successful. Thank you.
Please welcome the Executive Director of MICHauto and Vice President of Automotive and Mobility Initiatives for the Detroit Regional Chamber, Glenn Stevens, Jr.
I wish I had an hour right now. Doug, thank you. But I have 3 questions.
All right.
We've got a little bit of time here, and I thought I didn't plan on these 3 questions because I wanted to hear what you talked about first, and thank you, and great Photoshop work there at the beginning there.
It's the one thing AI is good for, which is face swapping. That's pretty well.
So, I love the priorities, but if there was one, the state has funds that are available. Mm-hmm. Many people call them once-in-a-lifetime transformational funds. But if we looked at what you talked about today and we put it in the context of your priorities, what's that one thing you would say to the governor and our legislature, do this now?
I think we have to create some better mechanisms for how we actually do planning here. I'll be straight. I think a lot of the culture and connection is really important, because while the state does have money, there's a lot more money on the way, right, is sort of the point. There's a lot of money that's hanging out there that, right now, the EDA is trying to figure out where that goes. And it is a competition. It might go to Ohio, it might go to Indiana, it might go to, and what we have to compete on is how we put together a plan that can have the right kind of impact. And the way I think we do that is by making sure that we have the right stakeholders who are involved from day one. A lot of things that you see on the federal side of grants are like, we need to see these kind of community things happen, and so someone might go approach a community college at the last minute. Hey, can you join us for this proposal and all this kind of thing? That's exactly the opposite of what we need to do here. And the communities that we see, working on this and succeeding in their appeals for this are actually bringing together stakeholders in ways that those proposals are by, in, and for the community in a way that I think are much more representative of the kind of impact that we should have. Because you see, for instance, universities that we hear have lots of money, but what do they actually do for the community? And not to put anyone on the spot, but my alma mater, I'm a proud Wolverine and go blue. But as U of M comes into Detroit, it needs to do different than is done in Ann Arbor, and maybe different than is done in Flint and Dearborn.
Okay. If you look at this group, and you very specifically used the word helping. So if you could talk to this group, which you can, because we're here, what can they do? To foster that person with an idea, those new companies, what can all of us do?
Well, I have one suggestion myself. None of you will like, but because I think we're one of the few companies that have done it in Michigan. But number one, don't have non-competes. I know it sounds really funny, but don't have non-compete clauses in your employment contracts. Because if someone wants to leave your company to compete against you, arguably there's a reason, right? And number one, it'll make you a better company. You'll work harder to keep those people and so forth. But there's a chilling effect. There are so many more entrepreneurs, potential entrepreneurs in companies already in this region that don't know they should be entrepreneurs or could be. And I think sometimes the structure of employment on some of these things kind of holds them back. So that's one. I think we can all work to kind of clean some of these kind of things up, or at least agree as a community we won't prevent people, right, from going and creating their own things. I think another thing is, give your teams time to work on, Google famously had 20% kind of time for employees, a day a week that they could go and mess around with other things. I don't know that we need to all do that, but to the extent possible, try to get your folks involved in things outside of your normal course of operation in your business. Get involved in some of the university programs and projects, and they'll learn something. They might bring it back into your organization, but it also is how you only get good what you practice, and we have to practice creativity, practice collaboration, and we have to make room and space for that.
Great. And I often think about our engineers. We know we have more density here than anywhere in the world, and we know they're generating patents for the companies, but I mean, how many people and how many companies were started in garages, right? How many ideas are in the garages of just Michigan alone? And so that's good advice. So last question, again, I wish I had more. So you got me reading a book, so it might be the recommendation. So what are you reading right now? What's a book based on what you talked about today and what we just talked about that you would recommend, or somebody to follow or reading?
Yeah, so the book I had posted there with the map across the U.S. of all the various potential innovation hubs is called Jumpstarting America. And it's an excellent book. It's by a bunch of MIT economists and researchers, but it covers the history of our economic growth in the U.S., which dates back to all the direct investment that the U.S. made in R&D during World War II, right? A time where Detroit was the arsenal of democracy. This is the place, right? We basically helped this country win the war through our production capability, but also our innovation. And it's been a long time since we spent the percentage of GDP that we used to on R&D in this country. But what you'll see here coming next is that it's coming back, right? Because we have to compete. The Chinese and many others around the world are really focusing on, again, technology innovation really drive, because we've all seen how it's upended every industry. And so if you read that book, you'll get a better sense of, again, what that's looked like, and they prepare collectively as we think about how we can be ready for what could be hundreds of millions coming into our communities via these tech hubs to really drive these ecosystems. But we have to understand what that looks like and figure out how to collaborate to land those.
So go to your local bookstore. You could go to that tech company online, but go to your local bookstore and get that book. Doug, thanks. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank all of you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of Optech and the co-founder of Digital Lakes, Rania Cruz. The Senior Vice President of Business Development at The Right Place, Rob Yanis. The co-founder and Executive Director of Michigan Founders Fund, Trista Van Tine. And to moderate the discussion, Senior Reporter at Crain's Detroit Business, Dustin Walsh.
All right, thanks for being here. We're going to be as controversial as possible and solve all of your problems. That's our goal. Now, but first, we really want to talk about sort of how we get that tech talent, right? That it's been a conversation that has been circling around here for generations. Well, we got to start with people. That was what Glenn had mentioned earlier. We have to start with people. Michigan, unfortunately, is losing population. One of 17 states that lost population last year. And also, to top that off, 77 of our 83 counties last year had more deaths than births. We're not even replacing the people that we're losing. Wayne County, Macomb, Ingham, all of the major counties in this region have lost population. Yet, Grand Rapids, the combined statistical region, the counties around, managed to gain population, has for more than a decade. How is Grand Rapids successful? Because as someone that lived there for a long time, I'm sort of dumbfounded by how it can be so successful when the rest of the state isn't.
I think it's large part due to the community that lives there. They are a very philanthropic community. They're very interested in helping the community grow. They have a kind of a philosophy that essentially, by helping the business community, helping the community, like all ships rise. So there's a very strong co-opetition element to how they're conducting business there. And I work at the Right Place. We're an economic development organization. So one of the things that we do is that we help kind of facilitate that culture, help convene those business leaders that actually want to contribute and actually help the entire local economy grow. I think that's a big part of it. So, I'll kind of like go back a little bit. It's good to kind of put this in a framework in my opinion. So the Right Place essentially has 3 strategic pillars: people, place, prosperity. I just spoke a little bit to the people element. Another thing about our people in our local economy is that we have a very diverse economy that's actually growing in diversity. It's not diverse right now, but the trajectory is certainly in that direction. We have only 4% of our white community is growing. That's expected to grow over time. The black community is expected to grow around 43% over time, and then the Hispanic community around 140%. So it's very good to kind of keep that in mind. And what I also love about the local community over in Grand Rapids is that they've embraced this idea. They've actually looked at diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to make sure that they're bringing that part of the economy with them as they grow their businesses. And they're also thinking about how they actually address their essentially their new customers that are actually coming online.
Mm-hmm. And with that, and we kind of talked about this backstage, but Metro Detroit historically, its Achilles heel has been that it has multiple counties, all very powerful, and they fight with each other. We don't have the advantage of being a Houston or a Nashville, where it's one large county system that operates into the city. So even people that live in the suburbs sort of feed into the same city, the same metro. Does Grand Rapids have that advantage? Is it? I mean, there's a lot of counties over there, but they seem to work at a little smoother pace than they do here.
Right, we have collaboration. So we're an 8-county kind of region. That's why we call ourselves the Greater Grand Rapids region. And the idea is that we're all working and we're all creating our unique kind of personalities within our individual communities. And we believe that we're stronger as a whole rather than trying to work as individual communities kind of beating each other up to get businesses to move into our area. We believe it's better to work together.
Sure, and I want to go to you next, Rania. Rania, sorry. We talk about sort of building tech talent. We're shockingly good in this state at keeping our talent. I think people always talk about that. I've fought against the brain drain for a long time because I think it's a misnomer. We're one of the best states at keeping our college graduates. Unfortunately, they're almost always electrical and mechanical engineers. We're not so good at keeping sort of our IT talent and on that side. Is that evidence of the culture or the opportunities that are here? What advantages can we play? I mean, how do we stop that outward migration of that sector?
Yeah, certainly. First of all, I have to say that we are losing about 40% of our graduates to other states. So it is a major issue that we're facing. Sure. And to your point, a lot of the engineers tend to stay here. They like to work for automotive. However, if you're a high-tech person, if you're an IT person, typically you don't think about Michigan as a place for high-tech. You don't really migrate there. And it was kind of interesting. I was with the Lieutenant Governor, Gilchrist, not too long ago, and we were talking about this issue, and he said that back when he graduated from the University of Michigan, go Blue, he basically said that he never even considered Michigan as a place to go work because it just did not have a lot of tech opportunities. So it really is a branding issue. I think there's a lot of opportunity here in Michigan, but what we need to do is we can't be so automotive focused. It's of course mobility, but there's also technology is embedded in every company and every industry. And so we really need to showcase all the technology that's happening across all the industries, in healthcare, in finance. There's so much technology that's happening and people just don't know about it. And so I think that we need to come together and really collaborate and showcase all the wonderful technology that's occurring across all industries. It's almost like the wine industry. If you have just one winery up north, no one's gonna go. If you have a lot of wineries up north, you get a following, you get people that wanna go visit, and that's what we need to create here in Michigan.
Clustering, yeah.
And then, of course, I mean, I can talk about the pipeline, but there's a lot to be said in terms of, the chicken or the egg, but I'll let some of the other folks here talk about some of the other issues.
Sure, and Trista, I want to go to you, because we talk about startups a lot, and we have Doug here, who's a unicorn at Duo Security. We've got May Mobility, we've got OneStream. We do have some companies that have been quite successful, but a lot of the culture here has sort of been our startups are always sort of our spin-offs, right? GM, Ford, or somebody would spin out a unit, it'd become its own entity. But they never really were on a growth pattern. It was more of a sustainability pattern. And so when we look at sort of the culture of creating new companies and building them to those mega giant companies that employ a lot of people, what role can sort of the rest of the companies around play in sort of creating, improving the economic picture and sort of creating more startups? Because most of these companies have a venture fund at this point. I don't see a lot of the headlines of investing in companies here, though. So how do we sort of create that new culture in those startups here?
Yeah, absolutely. So Michigan Founders Fund, I'm really fortunate and privileged to get to learn from and support a lot of the state's high growth entrepreneurs, those who are actively building these kinds of companies right now. And I would argue that they already are creating that value here in Michigan. We're just not doing a good job of telling that story and telling the story of Michigan tech. So I'm going to throw out some info, some stats and data, because data is powerful and data doesn't lie. So without technology startups, there would be no net job growth in the US economy. And although they only represent about 4% of total firms, they actually represent 70% of R&D investment, 60% of R&D jobs, 27% of our exports, and 8% of total wages. These kinds of companies can have a tremendously outsized impact on the economy and on the workforce. And Doug, one of our unicorns, that's a great success story, obviously, but there's 4 other unicorns that we've had: StockX, OneStream, LlamaSoft, Rivian. And of those 5, only 1 is an auto industry company, which, it's important to tell that story again of the diversification that already exists here. So some other stats that I find interesting. There's 12 companies in Michigan that have all been formed in just the last decade that are responsible for over $1.2 billion of investment capital into our state, and they employ nearly 2,000 people. That's huge, that's tremendous. And I can't sit here in one campus march just without talking about the Gilbert story. This is not a spinoff, right? Dan Gilbert started Quicken Loans in '85 at the age of 22. Fast forward to 2020, they went public for $36 billion valuation. And in between all of those years, he invested hundreds of millions into emerging startup companies. He helped co-found many other companies, again, one including StockX. And he invested billions into placemaking and into philanthropy here in the state of Michigan. So entrepreneurship breeds entrepreneurship. What the stories we're not telling, though, we've all heard of the Gilbert story in some form or fashion, but one example of one of those smaller companies that he invested in along the way, Rocket Fiber, they also had an exit in 2020. A lot of people probably don't know about it. It's a relatively modest exit in terms of the venture space, but that exit still led to the creation of 4 new startup companies from those employees with, I think over 500 million in value creation from that. Same with Duo. Doug's pretty modest and humble, but I think it's important to talk about the tailwinds of Duo. So yes, $2 billion exit, but from that exit came 4 new companies in the last 4 years alone. They've raised over $75 million, poised to raise hundreds of millions more in the next few years. And the Duo exit also created a lot of millionaires in the state of Michigan that are now actively making angel investments into these new emerging tech companies. So we really need to, VC-backed startups are really a micro economy in our state that needs to become a pillar of the macro economy if we really want to move Michigan forward.
How do we do that?
How do we do that? Yeah. Oh, I wish I had all the answers. There's lots of things. I think it starts with, I can talk about policy examples, but I think it starts with culture, right? Like, again, this going back to, this already exists here. Some of these things people probably didn't know, and we're not doing a good enough job telling those stories. Of those 12 companies I referenced that have raised over $1.2 billion, most of them, again, not in the auto industry. These are consumer goods companies like Floyd, like Bloomscape. They are fintech companies like Groundspeed Analytics. They are health tech and life science companies like Genomenon, like Work It Health. Doing tremendous things here, and yet so many people outside the state of Michigan just have no idea, and that's on us. We need to do a better job of telling that story and making sure that when we do that, we're rolling out the welcome mat to people and saying, in Michigan, for these startups, for these founders, we see you, we want you here, you belong here, and we will support you to be successful. We'll help you be successful. And when you fail, not if, when, because they're gonna fail, we'll help you start again. And that's really important.
I couldn't agree with the branding issue. I don't think we tell our story well enough. There is a lot of innovation that's occurring here in Michigan. There are a lot of entrepreneurs. There is a lot of venture capital, but we're not telling our story. People really don't understand the opportunities that are here in Michigan. We definitely need to do a better job of rebranding ourselves, almost like the Pure Michigan story, but geared toward innovation and technology. So.
Right, and I want to kind of fall on that sort of this idea of creating that, whether that's culture, whether that's policy. I mean, if we look at the MDC in the state, we supported almost an endless stream of automotive jobs. Sometimes it's a basic automotive plant that's going to build this. But assuming this sort of EV future that we keep talking about is going to be absolutely real, that means fewer jobs. It just does. Fewer people need to make fewer parts because there are fewer parts in an electric vehicle than there are in a traditional internal combustion engine. Putting some of those investments, no doubt, into jeopardy. So is there, Rob, this is for you, is there an opportunity to change, to shift the way we are investing in sort of jobs and companies? Is there something we should be doing that we're not doing at a more macro level?
I think we definitely have a lot of opportunities, but to your point, you're right. We actually have a lot of our incentives and the way we actually frame attraction initiatives geared towards manufacturing companies, because they kind of put up the big numbers in terms of like helping the state with jobs, in terms of number of jobs. But when you're getting to the point, and we were talking about this, Dustin, when the economy is a little bit flatlining and you're adding like these large influxes of jobs, then we really need to think thoughtfully in terms of like how we address those. One thing to remember is that these manufacturing companies that we're bringing in today are not your grandfather's manufacturing companies. These are highly automated jobs that people don't want to do, can be automated. We're at a point in our economy where the technology is catching up with our desire to actually have some things automated that maybe people don't want to do. So that's one. And then two, like where it's maybe not working so well, to your point, is more in the technology sector. Because technology sector is not really about large CapEx, property, plant, and equipment. Technology sector is more about intellectual capital and the knowledge workforce. So the idea is, how do we go about incentivizing those tech companies, that knowledge capital that comes in people, to move to Michigan? So That's one of the things we're looking to do. One of the things we're doing in Greater Grand Rapids area is we're actually putting together, groups of stakeholders that are in technology. They're leaders, CEOs, CIOs, and we're actually really thoughtfully thinking through, what is the strategy around how we want to, again, lift all ships, not only for the companies that are currently winning, but also the companies that we want to bring in and kind of win with the rest of the cohort.
Mm-hmm. And then are there policies that could specifically go in place to attract those? And this is for Ronnie and Trista. What policies can be in place to get more tech talent, to get more startups? Are there examples of other states that are doing a better job than we are? Where is this shining light we should be looking at? Because I feel like we've been talking about this for well over a decade. And we're moving the needle, but it's not moving as quickly as anyone would want. So, is there someone doing a much better job that we can sort of mimic or look to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've been talking about this for quite some time. Certainly there's no silver bullet, and there's a lot of things that we can be doing. Obviously, we see Silicon Lakes, we look at tech titans, we look at different hubs around the country, tech hubs. And one as close as Ohio X, I'm sure all of you have heard of it. They're building tech communities, and there is a public-private partnership that is taking place. I love what Grand Rapids is doing in terms of the corporate community working in collaboration with one another. Southeast Michigan, by and large, have been very, very competitive. And there's, in my opinion, less collaboration. And we really do need to come together, and when we're talking about technology, we're talking about we need the corporations on the table. We need colleges and universities. We need entrepreneurs. We need the public sector. We need not-for-profits. I was so pleased that MICHauto is doing this because we're partnering with MICHauto, Detroit Regional Chamber, and I'm speaking on behalf of Digital Lakes. It's really a platform to bring all parties together so that we could rebrand Michigan as a technology-based hub to attract the talent that we need, because obviously we're losing a lot of tech talent, and there's a lot of great opportunities here, but guess what? If we're not able to build that pipeline, more corporations are going to leave. And so we do need that greater collaboration among all these organizations. Now, when you're talking about specific things that we can do to build a tech talent pipeline, there are many different things that we could do. Certainly, we need to retain the people that are here. We, at Digital Lakes, we're looking at a micro-internship program so that we could try to get to those students as freshmen and sophomores to really highlight and showcase all the industries and all the great innovation and technology that's occurring across our state. We're looking at things like, the international talent. Now, international talent is an untapped resource. Michigan is ranked number 9 in terms of the international talent. And yet, we're losing about 40% of them to other states. They're the ones that are getting all the STEM, the STEM degrees. Mm-hmm. Over 50% of the students that are graduating with engineering or IT degrees are international. And we need to do a better job of enticing them to come. And we need to change the mindset of our corporate communities and CHROs to be more open-minded to hire that amazing talent, the OPT talent, that we're losing out on. So, and then of course we're talking about upskilling, reskilling. I heard a staggering statistic yesterday that said in a few years, 50% of the workforce is going to be between 50 and 70 years old.
Oh, good.
So that means that, we really do need to look at different pockets of talent and upskill that talent and bring them back into the workforce. And of course, we look at the K through 12 and looking at, great teachers and great curriculum. I had the pleasure of visiting the Manugian STEAM school, and they have hands-on curriculum that really gets these students engaged and really delivers the curriculum in a different light to get more children involved and more interested in careers in technology. Those are the type of things that are really important. But once again, as a community, we really do need to come together to rebrand, to have the innovative exchange across all industries, and to collaborate to build this pipeline of tech talent so that we don't lose future businesses in Michigan.
What's the fundamental piece missing there? Because I mean, it has to be money, right? Because we're looking at we're the only OECD wealthy nation on earth that spends less than 1% on job training.
It's pathetic. I mean, truly pathetic, yeah.
So it's really about creating capital or using capital to invest in training or upskilling or, whatever.
Yeah, we need to do a lot more. I know that there's a lot of great things that are happening in pockets, but they're not as impactful. We definitely need to make the investment, and we need to measure the programs that actually work, because there's a lot of money that's being spent unnecessarily on programs that we think might work, but we really do need to, and this is the accountant in me, I'm not an engineer. I'd like to measure what we spend money on. I like to see a return on investment. And so we really do need to evaluate where we're spending the money, make sure that we're getting the results out of it, and make sure that we're funding the organizations and the programs that actually do work. And we need to collaborate and bring them with the corporate community. Corporations need to invest too. It's ridiculous that they just think that somebody's going to pop out of the university with so many skills without making that investment. Corporations need to invest in their people.
Absolutely. And then when it comes to policy from a startup perspective, I sort of want to shift to that because as we talked about, sort of we know sort of where startups come from, who creates them. You don't see them in sort of pockets like Detroit. Again, we're doing better, we're growing. But it's really easy to graduate college and get a great job right out of college at Ford, GM, wherever, suppliers, wherever it is. I mean, what is that missing piece to create that extra step or whatever it needs to create more startups and more tech talent sort of on that side?
Yeah, so I don't think it's just one missing piece. There's no magic bullet, but there's a lot of things.
Wish there were.
Yeah, absolutely, that we could be doing. And I'll start by confessing that I'm a Michigander. I grew up here, but as soon as I could, I left. So I graduated from U of M in 2005, and I just returned as a full-time resident in 2020. And when I got back here, what I saw in terms of the growth of our tech ecosystem in that time frame, it did excite me to stay, and it excited me to be part of it and try to help it grow, right, and do what I'm doing now. But still, even with that growth, relative to growth in places like Colorado and Texas, even in places nearby, again, metro areas like Columbus and Indianapolis, it's not enough. It's really been incremental gains, and we need to direct real capital and real resources into high growth entrepreneurial advancement. And that's really just to prevent ourselves from falling further behind. But in doing so, in the process, what we're going to achieve is that we can then leapfrog those other towns that I mentioned, because we already have here a great pool of talent, world-class educational institutions. We do see those gains and an increase in startup activity and investment. So if we really double down on what's working, and going back to what both Sonia and Rob said, creating cohesive strategies, we can really put ourselves on the map, and we have all the raw ingredients, we just have to put them in place, right? So tactically, there's two objectives that we need to prioritize to accomplish that. The first being, we really have to encourage individuals to start these kinds of companies or to join these kinds of companies, and that means shifting the narrative and rewarding risk-taking. The second objective that we need to focus on is really around increasing the survival and success rate of these startup businesses. And policy in that area needs to focus on helping them with first checks, first financing. We have a huge gap there in supporting startups in the state of Michigan. We need to get more capital to entrepreneurs faster. And we need to improve the support programs that are already in place that are focused on commercialization. So tactically, some things that we could do, what that looks like, we could create an investment promotion agency. So what I mean by this is kind of a group at a state level whose sole purpose is to go out and find proactively those fast-growing global companies who are looking for their next destination and make sure that they land here in Michigan, because that attracts, that opens new markets, that attracts foreign investment. Foreign investment leads to immigration, it leads to population increase, and more so population increase of highly skilled talent. We could do things similarly, just having national, international, sister city tech exchange programs, simple things. We need to make it easier for people who have the means to make investments to do so and to want to do so. So we should offer angel and venture tax credits. We need to make it easier and more desirable for startups and tech executives who are experienced to come here and build here. So that means things like startup tax holidays, personal income tax holidays for those executives who want to be here. There's a lot of very specific things that we can do that are going to attract more growth in this area. And again, I can't stress enough that we have to do that now. We had to do it yesterday, actually, but we're talking now today. So we have to start today, and we have to really make a stronger push to establish this as a pillar of our economic strategy as a state.
Right, and there's like 6 specific examples of what can be done. I just want to point that out, because often we talk in platitudes, and those are very specific results, or examples. And Rob, I want to talk to you too about this idea of what you can do. So what is, Grand Rapids in the right place have had a lot of success. You've enjoyed a lot of success. What is the next evolution? Obviously, what is it, you want 10% of the workforce to be in tech jobs, I believe? Was that the next goal? How do you fundamentally accomplish that? Because we're all looking to do the same thing. How are you going to accomplish that, and how can that be extrapolated to other places?
Right, we have like 100+ page strategy online if you want to check it out. But
we have 3 minutes and 25 seconds.
It's really good.
Right. So I'll try to distill it. Again, just using the tools that work really well from our cultural perspective. I mentioned before, like, other businesses, successful businesses wanting to help new businesses in the community. We really think it's important that a successful business actually, contribute. For example, let's say they need a supplier to help them with a new SaaS problem that they've come up with. Why don't they tap the local community in terms of like finding entrepreneurs that want to, solve that problem for them? Maybe make some sort of competition to solve that problem. So we're trying to think very creatively in terms of what do we have and what are we doing well, and how do we use that to grow the overall economy in the greater Grand Rapids region.
Okay, give me an example. I want to know specifically what you can do to grow that.
Sure. So, for example, like we're known as Furniture City over in Grand Rapids.
I worked in a furniture factory in college for like 3 weeks before they fired me, but yeah.
Right. So perfect. So, like for example, like a large manufacturer, like a steel case or something like this. The idea is that they give us a problem, and then we're actually getting together, smaller groups of startup founders, or maybe even going to take that to the university level and look for ways to actually solve those problems. But the whole idea is to grow organically as much as possible. We're also looking into incubators and actually using maybe some brand recognition of these incubators to actually attract talent that's from outside of the region into the region to help solve those problems.
Mm-hmm. And now, again, this all boils down to people. It's getting the right people here, it's keeping the right people here, and it's enabling the people that are already here. I think we talked about being risk averse. We talked about not having the right tech talent here. The part we haven't talked about is sort of this culture, because we look at where population grows. Utah, Colorado, it's all these big outdoor states that don't have necessarily a one-trick pony kind of thing going on. They almost have to build these new sectors there. And we're trying to do the same, but with our legacy sectors. And so is there something outside of that, in the culture that we can change? Is there something, because we talk about culture so much, and it's almost lost its meaning here, but I mean, what is it fundamentally, culturally, that we can change to market ourselves better? Because I feel like we always have a marketing issue. Mm-hmm. And so like, what is it that we can do? And that's for everyone on the panel if you have ideas.
Well, I mentioned this earlier, we definitely need to rebrand, and we need to, I know that there's a lot of competition going on, but we really do need to come together and collaborate, and I love what Grand Rapids is doing. We just need to do it as a statewide. We absolutely need to bring all parties to the table and come together and bring the best minds together to think outside of our own companies and think about the state as a whole. I think that's absolutely critical for our state.
I think it's also important to think that technology has a long tail to it. So even within these larger verticals, let's say health sciences, for example, there's many different problems within that can be solved by small business and startups. So the idea is that there can be a very large contingent of very successful businesses here in Detroit, and then also in the Grand Rapids region. But the idea is to niche down, in my opinion.
Anything to add, Tris?
Yeah, I think with culture, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier about we need to roll out the welcome mat, right? We need to make sure that we're creating an environment and a culture that celebrates and uplifts high growth entrepreneurship. One of my favorite quotes that has actually been something that's that I've referenced a lot in my career is something that Maya Angelou said. It's people will forget what you did, they'll forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And we need to ask ourselves, how are we making these companies feel, right? We're not doing a good enough job celebrating what they've already done, what they're doing right now, and making sure that they know, like, Michigan is absolutely the place that you should be. Think of it this way, do you just show up to someone's house uninvited? Even if it's a lifelong friend? I would suspect probably not, I don't at least.
I don't do that.
Yeah. And then when you get there, do you want to stay if you don't feel welcome? So what we all have a role in doing here in Michigan, all of those who care about the future prosperity of the state, is making sure that we are doing a better job of inviting people into our house here in Michigan and making sure that when they get here, they feel valued.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for us. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm sure you can ask these people all kinds of questions during this break. So thank you.
Distinguished guests, we will now take a 15-minute break.
there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Yeah. Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Oh, picket lines and picket signs don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? Oh, what's going on? Right on. Right on. Right on. Everybody thinks we're at home. Oh, but who are they to judge us? Simply cause our hair is long. Oh, you know we've got to find a way. Bring some understanding here today. Picket line and picket signs don't punish me with brutality. Come on, talk to me so you can see what's going on. Yeah, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. Right on, right on.
She musters a smile for his nostalgic tale. Never coming near what he wanted to say, only to realize it never really was. She had a place in his life. He never made her think twice. As she rises to her apology, anybody else would surely know. He's watching her go. But what a fool believes he sees. No wise man has the power to reason away what seems to be.
Please make your way back to your seats so our program can resume. Also, we have a cell phone at the AV booth in the center of the room. Please come see us.
Please welcome the Senior Director of MICHauto, Drew Coleman.
Wow, what an incredible first half of the conversation. I'm excited for what we still have this afternoon, and I'm excited that you're all here today. Everything that we do is because of you, our partners, our investors. When we say that we are the voice of industry, it's your voice that we're taking with us to impact that change in our ecosystem. I'm also excited to be able to announce this year's 2022 Volunteer of the Year. This individual co-chairs our talent committee for MICHauto. She's opened the doors of her company to our young people through the Discover Auto program. And most importantly, I think she's always willing to raise her voice, to tell us her needs and the needs of her company. So I'm honored to welcome to the stage Whitney Lejeski, the 2022 Volunteer of the Year.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you, Glenn, and the MICHauto team. I'd also like to say thank you to my colleagues from Omron who are here with me today. It's been such a privilege to work with MICHauto over the years, and I look forward to the years to come. So thank you again.
The next session of the program is sponsored by CGI Technologies and Solutions. Please welcome the Chief Executive Officer of Q Factor, Tammy Dorr.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tammy Dorr. That's a long walk from the back of the house. It's good to see you all, and it's great to be back here in Detroit. So We've heard a lot of really awesome information today about how we tell our story in Detroit, how we educate our workforce, how we keep our workforce here, how we build companies. I want to talk a little bit about how you build a place that people want to be. Some of it's going to be really intuitive to you all. The question everyone really needs to ask is it happening? I was asked to join you all today because, of course, I spent a lot of time here in Detroit working at the Chamber and helping to build this city and this region. When I went to Denver in 2005, what I immediately recognized is we had a serious talent issue. How many of you in this room know somebody who's recently or is thinking about moving to Colorado or the Denver region? Okay, that's a lot in this room. What people forget is in 2005, that was not the case. And that's the story I want to leave you with today. In 2005, when I arrived, the community was actually going to invest $1 million into building a little center, staffing it 7 days a week, just so that when people came to visit, they would go in there and we could tell them why that they would want to live in Denver. So when you look at success stories, no different than this great place, Detroit, and the state of Michigan, please don't forget that these things need to be strategic and intentional, and they take time. So we set out to build a magnet for the future workforce. We looked at the fact that our companies were leaving because they could not get talent. So we would get startups, but as soon as they started to grow or got venture funding, they actually had to move to the coast because there was no talent there. So we were really grasping at straws at this point in time. And really starting from a complete blank slate. We knew that every city and state in the country was fighting for talent. We also knew at that time that when we looked out to the future, it was only going to get worse. For every new employee entering the workforce, roughly around 2005, 2008, we as a country were losing 2 people out of the workforce. So just the straight demographics were against us. So 1 coming in, 2 leaving. Who's going to get that 1? And that's when we decided that we needed to put a plan together and build a city solely and completely for the purpose of getting all those people that you all know to move to Colorado and to live in Denver. What we learned in that process, though, was everybody's doing it the same way. And so when you look at crafting a plan or doing something, if there's a blank line in front of the sentence about who you are, how you educate employees, how you bring them into the workforce, and you can fill in any state or city name, it's probably not going to work because there are 50 states doing exactly the same thing. The formula is simple. Create a place, develop the talent, attract the talent, keep the talent. You guys all know this, right? I mean, we've seen it on a million PowerPoints, a million slides. You've heard it in all kinds of meetings, whether it's inside your companies or actually in the community holistically. The thing is, we started with, if you build it, they will come. We really, really believed that if we looked at everything that future workforce was looking for and we built it, then they would have to come. So we studied media. What shows were they watching as kids? What music were they listening to? What were their cultural images about what they thought it looked like when they graduated from college? Do you all remember when you graduated from college? Yeah, you do, right. Okay. Remember you had an image in your mind about when I graduate from college, I don't know, you're going to wear a suit. I wanted to wear one of those weird 80s girl ties. Remember those? Yeah, you remember. There's a lot of paisley at the time, too. But you thought about what you'd look like, who you'd work with, where you'd live, what that job would look like. And it was all, maybe you didn't know it, but it was all actually being driven to you by what you were watching in movies and what you were seeing in your community. Those images were being created. We decided to understand what images were being created and build it. But things have changed. Now, the mantra for cities, regions, and states is if you build it, they will come. If they come, you will build them. And then they will stay. So you might be able to get them. You may be able to keep them for a bit if they're already here. But now you need to build them. I call it the hard infrastructure and the soft infrastructure. Build an amazing city, build an amazing state, with all the physical attributes that you need, infrastructure, buildings, cool places to live, you name it. But the soft infrastructure is how those people are developed, how they're integrated into the community, who they know, and whether or not they feel a part of what is being created here. This is where this area has so much power, probably more than any other city in the country or region. And I've been doing work like this around the country for decades, so I really do see it all. The targets for the future workforce may seem obvious. In-state graduates, in-state graduates. I'm gonna say it one more time. In-state graduates. You can market all around the country. You can try to attract talent. I appreciate it, I get it. We are in the Midwest. In the Midwest, people are committed to their families. They stay near their families. I bet you didn't know that the majority of individuals of young professional age, up to about 30 years old, they are actually staying in this country within 10 to 20 miles of the place that they grew up. And if you take it to the next level, you're still seeing around 60% living within 100 miles of the place that they grew up. I would venture to say that as you look at those numbers, they're probably higher in these markets in terms of the potential to stay. So how do you leverage that? Boomerang workforce and the latent workforce. I also want to add something I'll talk about in just a moment, women. In the United States, we are, of all developing countries, losing more women out of the workforce than any place else. Guess what? We're not just losing them, no one else is losing them. So we're not just, losing the most of those that are losing. Everyone else is staying the same or moving more women into the workforce. That, if you look at like a big net you could scoop up, it's right there. But you have to differentiate yourself in terms of telling a story of why women would want to be here and work here. At the core, I am a city builder. That's what I do. That's what my passion is. You can tell a story about a place. You can have great opportunities. People can make a lot of money. They can learn. They can grow. They can do all of those things. But you know what? People are still going to pick the place that they want to live. That might be family. That might be friends. That might be the outdoors. It might be a city. But what we know, in spite of what people say, in Denver, they always wanted to say, well, people are moving here because of the outdoors. They want to be near the mountains. Guess what? They did say that. But when you track the amount of people that were coming into the workforce that were actually doing that, exponentially smaller. So don't buy into it as you compete with any other parts of this country. People want to be in cities, and they want the vibrancy. And whether or not they're living in the middle of it, you absolutely must have it. So build a place where employees want to be. Is there a plan? How many of you in this room know whether or not there's a plan to build a place that our future workforce wants to live? So let me say this. There may be a plan, there may be 10 plans, there may be 100 plans. That's great. But you all are the people that make those plans come to life. So if there's a plan and you don't know about it, then I guess there's not a plan. So build a place that people want to be. And the biggest thing I can share with you in terms of building a place or city was actually mentioned here earlier. Until there is a significant public transportation system in this state and in this region, that barrier to entry will be massive. Public transportation changes everything. It creates affordability. It creates access. It creates fluidity between differing cities in a region. It connects people far more than one can even begin to imagine. That is one of the biggest placemaking barriers I see here right now. We faced it in Colorado, and we did bring everyone together to build out a regional transportation system. It's not easy, and I've been part of some of these efforts here in the state and in the region before, and I get it, but we got to be bold, really, really bold, and not just build a system, build one of the best systems in the entire country. Housing fund. Affordability and being able to buy a place to live is a key factor in where our future workforce is choosing to locate. Down payment assistance and closing cost. So there are some micro examples, even in Detroit, but also throughout the country, micro examples where cities and communities have brought together the public and the private sector to create a fund where employees can access that fund and get grants and or extremely low to no interest loans to help pay for closing costs and down payment assistance. You've seen this happen in a few places. It doesn't have to last for long. Once those new workers come in, it actually creates its own energy, and then over time, the people that they know, their connections, their communities follow them like lemmings. So I'm just putting it out there. I really do believe a significant fund would be transformational here. Work-live neighborhoods. I know that you all are certainly familiar with the importance of placemaking and vibrancy and how you live in a place where you're part of your community. I want to take it one step further. I have this vision that's been tucked in the back of my head forever that if somebody would just bite on it, I know it could be a huge success, but nobody's done it. I believe that we need to create neighborhoods solely focused on live work and the young professional from 20 to say 34 years old. And what I see that as being is a college campus, but just for living, right? Thank you. Just for living. So you come on and you have an instant community. Young people are getting married later. Families are smaller. People need to be integrated and engaged, and it has to be sticky. So how do you do it? You tell the entire country, if you move here, you get to live in this amazing campus that's built just for you. We have all kinds of ways that you can get career development and advancement and networking and mentoring, and guess what? You also live there. So I think there's tremendous power behind it, and I do believe what this area really needs is something that nobody else is doing. Nobody. It has to be unique. All right. I have a lot of ideas that not everybody bites on, but I figured this would be a good audience to be like, hey, maybe you could do it. I believe in gamifying talent attraction. We are asking people to move here and work here. But where's the win? What if the region and the state, the people that live here, the companies that are here, and higher ed was charged with gamifying how we bring in talent? You all know within your companies, where do you get the best team members? Somebody that works for you, that knows somebody that gets them to come in and interview, right? They stick, they stay, they come with a reference of somebody you trust and know. All right, so with that said, what if the entire state was engaged in making that happen? And I'm going to throw this out there. I actually believe higher education has a responsibility to place people in the state. And I actually believe that higher education, the way in which they get their funding, should in some way be tied back to how many of the people that they educate as in-state students actually stay here. And I do believe it could be looked at as a rebate. Somewhat like of a rebate. Maybe it's a holdback. I know it's super controversial to say that, but public funds are used to educate at public institutions. Why do the people of this state help fund public education? To drive their economy and to grow their companies. So how do you build an accountability that makes a level of responsibility for higher ed to ensure that that happens over time? Okay, you hold that one. We'll see where that goes. All right, talent platform. There are many ideas here that have been discussed about educating and training and investment in talent and growth. I love it. It's great. Without that, that's an absolute missing building block. What I will challenge everyone with is that unless that's the best in the entire country, it is not going to stand out and it will make very little difference. I promise you, because these companies are looking all over, and aside from industry-centric work, where they have to be in a certain place, every state and city they're talking to is telling the same exact story. So it's not about a tagline. or a brand, or how do you tell it differently? It's about actually being different. And I think you have to really, really, really push to find a way to create a national, a platform where this is an epicenter for educating and training a workforce, where people would move here only because there's this lifelong learning component that gets built into how we're educating, training, engaging, and keeping talent. Building a city for women. I mentioned earlier that when you look at it, there's a huge net of women out there that you could bring back into the workforce or keep in the workforce or embolden in the workforce. By looking at this and every aspect of what is keeping women out of the workforce, there is tremendous opportunity. I worked on a study titled Building a City for Women. You can Google it. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because that's not really the purpose. My game plan here is to just throw some thoughts out your way. But cities, states, regions, they were built by men. And frankly, over the last 50 years, most large-scale companies, of course, were built by men. But we're trying to get women to be in them, but the core way in which they were built, even the way we physically built our cities, was built by and for men. Look at this study. Think about how you change the smallest of things and start to be able to tell a story that we're not just inviting women to be here and stay here and grow professionally. We are physically and literally building a city where women are safe, they move around in our infrastructure and our environment in a way that's built actually for them, for their size, for their scope, for the way they interact. It's transformational, and no city or state or region has claimed this space, and it's up for grabs. But that's where there's a huge amount of work for us. Thanks. Okay, I think we're gonna sit down and have a bit of chat. I just wanted to throw those things out there. The last thing I'm just gonna share with you is that look at the states that are attracting talent. Do y'all know who the biggest talent attractors are? Texas, Florida, Colorado, the West. I would challenge everybody to think about why. What are the public policies? What are the costs to business? What is impacting the ability for growth? It's been Michigan's been creative in terms of public policy, but I will tell you that I don't think on a national level that the policies have been much more than simply evolving policies that were already there. I think it's time to take a blank slate and do something that tells the whole country that something is really different now. And it's going to take some bold policy to do it. But if any other state is doing it, again, it's just not going to stand out. So those are my biggest points to kind of start with, but I think we're going to sit down and have a bit of a conversation. Yeah.
Joining Tammy on stage, please welcome the co-founder and chief executive officer of Global Strategic Supply Solutions and board chair for MICHauto, Lisa Lunsford.
Wow, Tammy, you have a lot of ideas, So I'm going to start with a little icebreaker that I always like to do. So, outer space or the ocean?
Outer space.
Tell me why. Tell us why.
I believe that if you look at the universe and you look at everything in terms of how it works and what we know and what we think we know, when you peel it back, the options are endless, especially when you start looking at everything from quantum physics to, the reality of whether or not time exists.
Well, I know you're an avid reader, and you read 100 books a year. So what number are you on?
I'm on 96.
Okay. I don't know how you find the time. So, I mean, you're pretty busy, but what genre is your favorite? And tell us why.
I believe really, poetry is probably my favorite because I do believe that all grand and bold ideas actually begin with the poets, move to the artist, move to the writers, keep evolving to the scientist, and then they loop right back around to the doers. So I think that really, for me, it manifests the same way that you build a city or a place.
And you are the city builder, as I understand.
Try to be.
Yes. And you have a project here in Detroit, Q Factor. So tell me why Detroit, And is that part of your vision, the live work neighborhood? And if so, is that a project that's going to expand into that neighborhood, or is you trying to create that there and they will come? What's the idea?
Well, we've partnered with Midtown and Invest Detroit and purchased the Jefferson School on Selden. That's going to be office space with some really interesting mission-based entrepreneurial opportunities in there as well. I will tell you, I'm a huge proponent of the future of office. I may be a contrarian, but I give it 24 months, 36 at the most, and I think there's going to be a massive shift back into the office. And I don't mean on a small scale, I mean much further than most people are probably talking about in the media. People need a city, a community, a place that they belong, and when we pulled out that office space, we have lost it, and we are continuing to lose it.
Well, you talk about community. So when we are talking about community, we are talking about communication, right? Interacting, collaborating with each other. So you started the organization Startup Denver Week, and from what I understand, it's the largest of its kind, inviting entrepreneurs worldwide, is from what I've gathered. And I would like to understand, and maybe for our audience here, how were you able to engage the community in that to make that such a success? Because that was started in 2012, and you just wrapped up, in September? So could you expand that?
So when we started Denver Startup Week, we didn't have hardly any tech companies in that market. We had a few, but they actually didn't even really know each other. And so we decided we needed to create a platform to at least understand what we had, and I'll use this word pretty directly, to pretend that we had something much bigger than what we had. And when we created it, we worked with the community to have them really envision what it should look like. Ultimately, it grew to the largest free entrepreneurial event in the world. And every year we bring in 50 to 100 ambassadors from across the country that are premier tech leaders, and we bring them in and they spend time blogging and telling the story of Denver. And then we work with anybody that wants to come there, move there, to help them get introduced to anybody that they want and potentially make a move to work for some of those companies.
But also, doesn't that organization then provide resources if you wish to start a company there, wish to sustain there? So how does that work with the community? You know, if you have someone living and working inside that community and they're looking to start a business, are they able to just come in and engage, or are they invited? How does it?
They can come in and engage. And the program was really not designed to actually provide the resources directly, but to create a collaboration of everyone that's providing services and streamline it even more directly. We coupled it with a 40,000 square foot entrepreneurial center called the Commons on Champa, which we refer to as an entrepreneurial park, because in a park, you can go sit down and just take in the environment, work on your own. You could meet a bunch of people, or you could go to an event. And we're running about 18,000 people through various programs, events, experiences there on a yearly basis.
So this year you focused on women. I think it was called Colorado Female Founders. Why?
Well, again, back to the point, we're missing a really critical market. That if we go directly after, you think about the consumer market or the retail market, when you're selling a widget, you're picking exactly who's going to buy that widget, and you're marketing to them very directly. You're creating a product that meets their needs, and you're telling them the story in a way that it meets their needs. But we're not doing that with 50% of the workforce, or much smaller than that now, but in terms of women. And so we really needed to highlight what they're working on, what they're looking for, their successes and their opportunities.
So when you think about, you were here, and then you decided to go to Denver. Why? Why did you make that move?
Well, I was here, I worked for a very long time, since the late 80s, in both banking and, of course, at the Detroit Regional Chamber, deeply committed. And I was recruited to go out and take an opportunity in another city. And I really made the move to really try to challenge myself professionally and see what it was like to be in another place. I actually will tell you that when I got there, I fully expected that it was light years ahead. Detroit was really struggling, at the time. And I thought when I got there that many of those same situations weren't being experienced. Here's what I learned. Every single city in the country is struggling. I have a theory that 1/3 of the environment in every city right now or place is broken. 1/3 is operating relatively solidly, and 1/3 is just killing it. Probably the same for companies. The thing is every city's phase in each of those buckets is different. The key is knowing which ones they were. In Denver, no talent. There was no talent. There was no real infrastructure, and there were really no really highly skilled workforce.
Okay. So I'm going to move a little bit into your personal.
Yeah.
How's your book coming?
How my book is coming along. I've been working on a book around building cities and how these experiences around how you physically build places and how you unite places and make people stick in them impacts the economies.
Oh, but you're also writing a nonfiction?
Oh.
Are you not?
A nonfiction, no.
Excuse me, you're writing a fiction.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Well, that one's going to be a much longer.
Oh, okay, so that's going to take a moment.
I'm plugging away. I am a writer, I love to write, and tell stories.
Well, you have brought a lot of ideas here that I really would like for you to expand on. That live-work community, that term, you call that building industry Detroit. What does that mean? What is that live-work environment? I mean, we can say that, but that means different things to different people. Like I'm looking at it and saying, is that remote? Is that a home-based business? How is that different? And does the government have to come in and actually write a policy for that, or is that something that happens pretty organically?
Well, industry is the brand name of the office space that we're building.
Okay.
So that is it is traditional office in the sense that it's not co-working, but it's shared communal spaces. So the tenants that come in there are generally there, for longer durations. The live-work piece really relates to how you build an office space as the heart of a neighborhood, and then you build residential and the amenities around it. It doesn't seem much different than what most people would think of a developer doing, but the environment and the way that you weave it all together is pretty transformational. We're building about 40 acres out right now in downtown Salt Lake City. Bozeman, we are in Sacramento. We've been building places and cities for a long time, so we really understand how it gets threaded together.
So then with that, what are the elements, or what is the recipe for a collaborative community, work and live community? What does that look like?
Well, some of it will seem very obvious to you, but it is actually, how well it's actually done. Right? I could list off the things that need to be included, but the reality is there are a lot of ways to get to that point. So let me just talk about just the physical infrastructure, right? You need a place that causes spontaneous collisions, meaning different types of people, whether it's different industries, different age groups, every different type of demographic, are actually interacting with each other and continuously sharing this collision of ideas that they have. These could be 1, 2, 3-minute conversations, or they could be new relationships built over time. I always say that the way that you build a city, I could put anybody here on one side of a city, I could build out the city, and then before you take one step to cross to the other side, I would know exactly which route you would take without telling you how to get there. And it's because you will follow the path that is most well lit, that has the most trees, that has the widest sidewalk, that has architectural beauty, all of these things you know. But when you're walking and experiencing it, your mind is making those decisions about where to turn and which way to go all along the way. That's why every street matters in a neighborhood, every single street. So once you get past kind of that infrastructure piece, it is how does the housing actually interact with the space? What amenities do you actually have built in that are walkable? Paris has just converted to the real goal of a 15-minute city, meaning you never have to go more than 15 minutes to get everything that you need to do to live and work.
Wow.
It's a powerful way to build neighborhoods. But remember, public transportation is a part of that, because if you can get someplace faster in that 15 minutes, you're going to be able to go a wider, radius.
Well, thank you, Tammy. We're going to end it there. And since you're not a sports fan, I know then you pull for us, right? You still have the heart for the Lions?
I have a heart for the Lions.
There you go. All right, well said. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, so much.
Please welcome the Chief Executive Officer of Anchor Automotive, Jose L. Flores. The Manager of Mobility Strategy and Marketing for Bosch, Beth Silver. The co-founder of ProNav Marine and a research engineer and relief captain at the Great Lakes Research Center at Michigan Technological University, Travis White. And to moderate the discussion, co-founder, producer, and host of Daily Detroit, Jer Stays.
All right. All right, everybody. All right, so all afternoon we have talked about this challenge that Michigan is facing with keeping and attracting talent. But in order for someone to buy into something, whether it's a recent college grad, a business owner, someone looking for a fresh start to change their station in life, or they have to see themselves in what you're doing. A place has to be welcoming and not only have the visible professional opportunities, but also the sense of place that they feel energized, and waking up and being a part of the community long-term is a thing that they want to do, so that someone can feel better about their future. It's not 1950 anymore. People have more options than ever for where they want to work. Companies need to be employers of choice, but we are not just investing in talent, but talent needs to invest in us. And we have to look at that as a more equal relationship in my mind. So let's talk about why people should choose Michigan with this excellent panel. I've done the research. You all have tons of options with where you could go, all talented individuals. Jose, why do you choose Michigan?
Sure, actually that's a very good question, Jer. I came to Michigan 6 years ago. I remember that when I was reading about Detroit and everything, I saw all this negative PR about it, Detroit, the city to disappear, Detroit ghost town. But the headliner that really caught my attention, I remember that perfectly, is Detroit versus everybody. That really resonated with me, and I saw this group, I saw the things that you guys are doing, moving the needle, all these executives together, working towards the same objective, and I said to myself, I want to be part of that group. So Detroit versus everybody.
When did you know Michigan was going to be home?
Forever. I grew up in Michigan, but I was lucky enough to go live in a few different areas. I lived in Charleston for a little bit for work, Chicago, and Stuttgart, Germany. But I always knew I wanted to come back. I've always been interested in the mobility industry. I've been around it my whole life, and I think it's just at a really exciting point right now. And so that was a big reason of coming back. There's just so many career opportunities when it comes to that here. There's also really the family aspect that I love about Michigan. There's so many family activities, but great education here in the state. And then also the community aspect. I just feel like the people here are so genuine, kind, hardworking. You really get a good mix here. So that's why I came.
Michigan is an active choice. It's a place where you can really get involved in a lot of ways. How about you?
Yeah, well, it's similar. I grew up in Michigan, and it wasn't a hard sell to stay. I went to one of our many fine universities, Michigan Tech, and for me it was also that community, a feeling of belonging, but more so coming from the perspective of sort of rural northern Michigan. Our lifestyle there is very different than I imagine it would be here, and for us, being 5 minutes from work to where you recreate and play and raise families, it was just that opportunity to have everything right there, and then to be able to hop on a plane and travel. So my wife and I both own businesses up there, found all the resources we need to be successful with that, so there's no reason to leave.
Yeah, Michigan really has something for everybody and whatever lifestyle that you want to do. And Detroit Metro Airport is such an asset because people don't realize we have so many direct connections to the world right here from Detroit, in part because of the auto industry, but it's also great for tourism and connecting with friends and all of that kind of thing. So, in what ways has Michigan benefited your career?
Well, it has benefited me in many ways, for sure, knowing all these great people, networking, different industries, different types of people, but as I said, working towards the same goal. How do we bring back Michigan? How do we convince people that Michigan is a great city and remind them that we are the city that put the world on wheels, right?
Beth?
Yeah, I mean, also coming from the mobility perspective, Michigan has the whole mobility ecosystem here. I mean, you have the OEMs, you have the tier suppliers, you have startups, you have tech companies. I mean, you have everybody at your fingertips in Michigan. So it's been very helpful for my career here because there's just a great network here to work with.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. I think looking at Michigan's mobility ecosystem and how it's inclusive, the fact that I'm here from 11 hours away if we drove, I really appreciate and was honored to be invited to this. But coming from the perspective of the maritime mobility in that realm, Michigan is surrounded by water, and we have every resource here to be a hub for maritime mobility as well. And I think, looking at the automotive here, if we can take that phrase of a rising tide lifting all boats, I think we can grow and scale that together.
Well, I don't mean to offend anybody, but water is one thing that the Southwest does not have on us, for sure. You know what, that leads me to another idea. When it comes to water and how important it can be for work and for recreation, I think that is involved in a lot of things we do, whether it's the kinds of things that we enjoy or the kinds of industries we work in. I know you like to run on the waterfront.
Yes. Oh, well, I think you were the one who's running.
You're running. Okay.
I'm walking on the
Walking.
water.
Okay. Yeah, and so it's something where it's whether it's the Detroit River, it's so many of the streams, so many things that we uniquely have. I think that's a great advantage, And how has that been for your company?
Well, we're surrounded by our customers and the folks that use our product. We're right next to that feedback and seeing it in its application. So it's been a tremendous location for us. And looking at the opportunities in the mobility side of things for maritime, some of the research we do at Michigan Tech University, we see a tremendous opportunity. 90% of world trade is done over water. Makes sense, right? But in Michigan, less than 15% of our freight moves over water. So we see that as an opportunity to really, advance the maritime mobility sector.
And lots of recreational activities too, whether you're into boating or sailboats or even just swimming, all those different things. So, people's personal stories are so important. And so what is your favorite place in your home that you like to take people to tell them and share about Michigan? Jose?
Sure. For example, Glenn won't let me lie about this. The DCFC matches on Keyword Stadium are just great. The environment there, I was very impressed. My first DCFC match with Les Detroit. It's impressive. Like, people are very energetic. They're like a family group. It's incredible.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm also glad about the re-signing of Devin Amu-Mensah.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be a great year for Le Rouge. How about you?
Yeah, so I've been doing this thing with people outside of the Detroit area or outside of Michigan and doing like this DIY walking tour of downtown Detroit. I'm no expert by any means of Detroit, but I'm more of an expert than people who don't live here. But it's been fun because I think if you didn't grow up in the Detroit area, you can sometimes have that negative perspective of it and not really understand all it has to give. So it's cool taking them around to the trendy restaurants, DIA, you have different sporting arenas, you have all these different things here that people can connect to. And I think it really is, the best part is seeing people's opinion change in real time about the city.
Yeah, up by us, it's got to be Lake Superior. It's a vast inland ocean where there's almost no traffic, nobody out there. And my hobby, my fun business is taking people fishing as a charter fishing, and taking folks out who maybe come from a very urban hustle bustle lifestyle and coming up there to unplug, typically by force, so we have no cell service out there a lot of times. It's amazing to see people connecting with our natural resources in that environment in that way. The eyes open up, all of a sudden you see things, smell things, hear things that you've never experienced, and that's really personally rewarding to see, bringing that connection into people's lives.
Yeah. Jose, you mentioned Let's Detroit real quick, and I think it's one of the programs that is really working to help change that conversation. What are some ways, and I'll end up going around everyone on the panel with this, what are some ways that we could, things that we could do to help change that conversation, not just internally, but with the rest of the world looking at places to make decisions?
No, that's a very great question, and this is not because it's a chamber event, but I think the several branches that the chamber has, like MICHauto, Let's Detroit, Leadership Detroit classes, each one of those branches addresses different pain points, if we want to call them that way. Let's Detroit in particular is how do we promote and engage young professionals to stay in the Detroit area, right? One of my colleagues on the MICHauto Policy Conference, Georg, I saw her over there, he said, or I think our main challenge right now is we have this pool of talent, right? And it's draining very fast, it's not growing, and it's draining to other states. So what can we do as businessmen or executives to promote that talent? Should we invest in people even before college, high school, engage with them, create that loyalty, promote education as a company, as talent? I think those are the main challenges that we're facing right now, because we're battling internally in this network for the talent because it's so scarce. We have the best engineers in the country for sure, but they're leaving Michigan, right? So how do we retain that talent? How do we convince them that Detroit is the city that is going to get them to their career that they want?
Yeah, see themselves in it. And I think it's not just about engineers, but all kinds of different talent, right? And it's because these companies, when you talk about mobility, it's not just about cars anymore, you know?
Yeah, I mean, going off of what you said, I think it's starting that earlier. And I think there are a lot of companies in Michigan already engaged. I know I work for Bosch, and we're engaged in STEM programs and developing that talent from an early stage. And then we do have some of the greatest universities that develop that talent further. And I think this was mentioned earlier this morning, but again, it comes back to that branding piece. I think, again, we all are talking about all the great opportunities in Michigan and what we have here, but people need to know about it, and people don't know about it. So it's getting that branding out there and using organizations like Let's Detroit to do that. I'm a career advisor there. I know there's also student advisors and everybody else, and they go around, and our job is really to try to attract people to come here from all those different pillars, like I mentioned, the community aspect, the family aspect, the career aspect. We have all of that here.
Well, you know, over the years, Detroit has been known, and Michigan is known as a state that works hard, and we do the work. But a side effect of that, as anyone who's run a business knows, is sometimes you're doing so much of the work that you're not telling people about the work. Mm-hmm. And that is also a very important of the success equation. I'm sure you've ran into that yourself.
Absolutely, especially wearing the hat of Michigan Tech University. We do a lot of work, bringing in that K through 12, getting them excited about STEM field. Within our community, we have a Smart Zone incubator that helps transition, the ideas and the innovation, to commercialization opportunities. And that's all available in a very hard to get to rural area. So I think also from my perspective, looking at Michigan as a big state and considering how somebody could come here for many reasons and locate anywhere within the state and have those opportunities is really important to highlight as well, and what that potential sell would be. In particular, looking at some of our high-tech workforce in our area, they work remotely, or they have the means to participate in activities going on globally, even though we're up there. And a big part of that is connectivity and just having that access. So
yeah, connectivity throughout the state is important, and in all of our cities, not just our rural areas, but our urban areas as well. And it's something that we definitely need to make sure that we do and we wrestle with, so that everywhere you live in Michigan, it's a place where you can have access to those kind of remote jobs. And with the rise of remote work is also a rise in people selecting where they live based on lifestyle and those kind of preferences. Now, Jose, I know backstage we were talking about a list probably as long as this table of the different places you have worked in your career. So when you went through that wheel and landed on Michigan, what was the thing for you?
Well, for me, as I said, I turn around companies all over the world, and for me, Michigan, it just resonated with me. Working with all these young professionals, motivating, going back to Let's Detroit, actually, they have a very good initiative. If you're an ambassador, I personally am an ambassador for Let's Detroit, and young professionals reach out to you, and you give them advice about career advice, professional advice, And right now, the way we're trending over, I think in the last couple of years, the applicant needed to convince you of why should you hire that person, right? And right now, it's all the way around. You need to convince that person why he or she should come work with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting transition that we're living right now.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You've mentioned family a few times.
Yep.
What about Michigan is great for somebody in that stage of life that's raising a family?
There's so many things to do here. I mean, I live out in the Berkeley area, so outside of Detroit a little bit.
Super cute downtown.
Yeah, it is. But there's lots of events going on in the Detroit area, but there's also a lot of events in southeastern Michigan. There's the zoo, there's the Henry Ford Museum. I mean, there's so many things to bring kids to, and again, going back to this education piece, I just know that my kids will get a great education here, and that's a huge thing for my husband and I. So that was really a part of it, of what attracts us here.
No, and to Beth's point, I think like the offering that downtown Detroit in particular, I live here in downtown Detroit, the offering of the entertainment, restaurants, everything, you have everything here at a walking distance, right? Running on the Riverwalk every single morning, going to these fancy restaurants, entertainment, concerts, going to a Lions game, DCFP games, you have it all here, like here, literally, you know?
But also to add, because Travis, we know you're from up north, so I don't.
I was about to get to him. I wasn't going to leave him alone out there in the trees.
He was starting to turn around like this.
Talking about Detroit, but then it's also nice that you have the hustle and the bustle of the city, but then you also can go up north and you can be basically at the lake, which feels like an ocean. It's just like, it's cool to have that aspect too, of kind of being a little bit more out there in a secluded area. So
Right.
we kind of have a lot of different areas to check out here.
Yeah, we're certainly surrounded by it. I mean, I actually miss the Pure Michigan. Everybody's heard about it, and we still get so much tourism influx to our local area. And folks mention, when you ask, how did you hear about Keweenaw Peninsula? Well, Pure Michigan, 10 years ago. They saw a billboard in California. It's amazing the reach that had, and I do think that type of focused effort into a campaign of promoting what we have here, all inclusive, as a lifestyle and environment, that's really important, and I mentioned, Jose talked about skiing, and, we live and work 5 minutes from where we work and recreate. Michigan Tech has a ski hill right across the canal, and I can see it from my office, so I know what the snow conditions are like, and sometimes a long lunch break's in order.
The app for that is your window.
That's right, yeah.
So you mentioned Pure Michigan. That makes me think that whatever initiatives we do, we need to think more long-term, right? Because that was 10 years ago. And I mean, still Pure Michigan's a thing, but when you're doing something, it's repeat, and get the message over there through generations. And if there's a criticism that I've had over the years from various organizations, it's short-term. It's, here's 6 months of funding, here's a year of funding. The magic about Pure Michigan is that it has been so many years and repeated. Do you think that kind of long-term investment across multiple platforms is what's needed?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. As you said, I think the road to success is for us to do a mid-long-term plan, very well concise with all these great people, with the objectives leading by Glenn, obviously, and I'm thinking we're trending towards the right direction.
Yeah, I think we are too, and there's definitely been changes in the last few years, for sure, around that, because I remember when it was like, here's a thing, and we're going to do an event, and then nobody shows up and you wonder why, right? You have to repeat, rinse and repeat to do those things.
Well, and it's also like a roller coaster, We were trending upwards, going this way, and then all of a sudden COVID happens, So we go down. Now I feel like we're starting to go up again. People are going out. We're having these types of summits, which is very nice for people that like this one-to-one face interaction,
Well, I'm very glad to see everybody again, right? Because working in a podcast studio in your spare bedroom gets a little lonely.
Yeah, for sure.
So you were talking about going up. Let's talk about Michigan's hopes for the next few years. What are your hopes for Michigan for the next few years? Beth, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think my biggest hope, and it goes back to what we've been talking about all day, is to really start to mitigate this overall talent shortage. That's a huge issue for us at Bosch. It's a big issue for so many other companies. It's a big issue beyond Michigan. But I really think, again, it goes back to branding what we have to offer here and hoping to retain some of the talent that we're generating. And it is, we have the talent here. We have some of the best universities. I think U of M is always listed as one of the top universities for engineering, for computer science. But then going beyond the engineering feel that we have Michigan State, which is the #1 supply chain management university, and I think it has been for 6 years in a row. So we're generating a lot of talent here. Now we need to keep the talent here. So my hope is that we are able to attract the talent and retain them. And I think, again, we go back to branding ourselves better and for companies to really have strong strategies in place to get people to come and work for them here in the state.
That's one thing I notice a lot in some recent trips that I made to Columbus, Ohio, is that recycling of people where there are jobs all the way through, whether you're in college or tech or whatever. And that's, I think, one of the things that has kind of fueled their growth. Because, you know, I for a long time thought that that city was Ann Arbor too in size, right? But it's actually larger than the city of Detroit now. And it's because, in large part because of that recycling. I think, you know, you never want to copy a place, but you can largely, you know, grab ideas that are good and make them your own. I think that's something that we could do here. What about you?
Sure. Well, this morning we heard a little bit about you know, the notion of businesses helping businesses, and I'm kind of thinking about that in the context of, you know, industry sectors helping industry sectors. Looking at my role as a maritime industry and outdoor recreation, but trying to connect that to all this activity and momentum here with the automotive. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, considering, you know, the amount of goods and product that are moving down in these really restricted corridors here. Thinking of ways that we could expand our maritime trade to incorporate some of these products, and you know, the potential. There's a lot of technology coming along the lines of, you know, small containerized shipping that could, you know, be taking place right here to alleviate some of that congestion in our, you know, kind of urban corridors. So looking at other ways and ideas like that to really take the industries we have and help them help each other.
Yeah, for me, I think it's very clear, keep developing the e-mobility sector, right? Keep working on the infrastructure for the EV business, that's huge right now. And also keep getting wins, like, for example, bringing new businesses towards Michigan, like Next Energy, for example. Mm-hmm. Keep developing those startups, those networking, those friendships, those investments, so we can really bring talent to Michigan, create more jobs, and just keep working towards that same goal, which is EV business, infrastructure for the city. You can have 1,000 of EV vehicles. If you don't have the infrastructure, what are you going to do with it, right? Where are you going to charge your car, for example?
Yeah.
So for me, those three objectives are the ones that I think we should keep working towards. It's a mid-long-term goal. It's not a short-term, as you were saying. But yeah, I think we're getting there.
Well, and looking at that long-term, the work that needs to get there will help in the short term, right? It'll keep people employed. It'll keep the wheels turning, if you will, to use a metaphor. You know, I look at all of this stuff, and you know, our time is kind of winding up here. So I guess I will go through each of you and say, what is your pitch for Michigan? If someone were coming to you, you know, that hypothetical college grad or that person who is looking to change their career, what is your quick 30-second elevator speech for Michigan? We'll go from the end of the table.
Wow, yeah, I would start with come here and take a look. Even if that means bringing your family on a vacation to experience everything we have, and then maybe take some tours of some of our, you know, plants or industry here while you're here, and maybe the universities with your kids. Take a look and see what's here, because that's an awareness, a big part of where everything starts.
I'm going to go back to the 3 pillars. I think there's so much opportunity from a family standpoint, from a community standpoint, and from a career standpoint here. I talked about a lot of my experiences now on the mobility side, but something that also attracted me to Michigan was the fact that if I don't want to stay in mobility one day, there's other industries I can get involved in out here and stay in the area. So there's just a lot to offer. Keep an open mind to what's here and come.
Yeah, and for me, it's the people, is the vibe, as I said. Normally when I invite people over, I try to convince them, because I feel so compromised with the city and I'm in love with the city that I want to convince them. We have such a rich history here in Michigan, Detroit, you know. For example, techno music was invented here in Detroit. Did you knew that? Like, I don't know how many people knew that. I didn't know that.
I mean, if you've gone to Movement or one of the festivals, you'll see the international crowds that come here that just love our music, that come from all over the world.
So, and writing back to Beth, what she said, it's not just the auto industry that is growing so fast here in Detroit. Actually, the growing industry right now is healthcare business here in Michigan. That's the first one right now. So there's a lot of offering work-wise, professional-wise, but also on their entertainment section and sporting section. So that's like my sales pitch normally.
See, for me, I think it's about being part of something bigger, right? Because you can go to a New York or whatever and find a job and all that other kind of thing. But here you can be part of something and really lend your shoulder to the wheel and make a change. And not just make a change for yourself, but make a change for your community, wherever you decide to live in this state.
And that's why I decided to end up here in Michigan. I like challenges. I like going upstream. So I'm like, I want the challenge. I want to be part of the movement. And I want to be saying in a couple of years, I was part of like making Detroit great again, you know?
Well, thank you all for your time. I really appreciate you.
All right. No, thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Please welcome the Vice President of Energy Operations at Dunamis Clean Energy Partners, Kamathi Booth. The President of American Axle and Manufacturing, Mike Samante. The Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Walker Miller Energy Services, Carla Walker Miller. And to moderate the discussion, the Chief Executive Officer of Sustainability, Carrie Dugan.
Everyone. So Glenn and the team gave us 25 minutes to talk about the most important topic here today. That's why we're here. Let me read from the sheet. Inclusion in the mobility and new energy economy. So I'm just going to cross out new energy economy because it's the whole economy, people. And start by asking our panelists for some definitions. So when we talk about inclusion, there's a lot of buzzwords, but I'd like each of you to just reflect on what it means to you in your shop and in your practice.
Oh, great question. You know, inclusion for us is, you know, beyond just race and ethnicity, gender, things like that. It's about the inclusion of ideas, the inclusion of experiences that aren't necessarily found traditionally. That's whether we're looking to attract new talent as we develop out our culture as a company. We think gaining different perspectives, particularly with the talent that we have here in Detroit, provides a tremendous advantage and value.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kamathi, I think that's great. You know, from my perspective, inclusion and for our company is all about no matter who you are, no matter what you do, come to work, feel welcome, appreciated, respected, feel like you belong to something really important and have the ability to contribute and achieve your goals. And I think that's working for us.
Yeah, and as an engineer by training who has had to fight my way to feel included and to be included for my entire career, and as a person who has really worked hard to develop an identity as a company that will merit inclusion so that we can open doors for other companies to be included. Inclusion is absolutely everything. And I heard something years ago that someone said, and it's so true, no matter what our intentions are, no matter what our thoughts are about inclusion, if you're not intentionally inclusive, we are by nature unintentionally exclusive because we gravitate to our comfort zones, and our comfort zones are being around people who are like us and think like us and look like us. So the intentionality around inclusion.
So true.
It's like we talked before this panel, because that was one of the words that we talked about. So why are we here? We're talking about economic transformation. You've got energy leaders up here. You've got auto and mobility leaders up here. But you know, what does the future look like, and who participates? And so you're talking about intentionality. Can we talk about how we're doing? Can we get a baseline of how we're doing in our various shops?
Well, for us, that's at the forefront of kind of what we do, why we even located here in Michigan. We currently have about 155 employees. We'll be expanding, adding another 30 to 80 throughout 2023. And we look, first of all, to hire within 3 miles of our plant. Our plant is located right on East Grand and Mount Elliott. And to develop intentionally transportation strategies and work-life balance strategies that will include that population that's historically been excluded in these type of opportunities is really why, as I mentioned, we located here. We've been manufacturing overseas since 2015, and there's quite a bit of difference and intentionality that has to be addressed when we're talking about locating manufacturing here and in other industries as well. But for us, it's how do we not just build out a plant with 2 people and 8 robots, but how do we invest in a community so that we can bring aboard 15 people, start them at great paying jobs, develop a career and pathways for them to not only develop their own skill sets, but take that back to their community and develop other entrepreneurial and innovative solutions that solve all of the problems that we address and tackle every day. I think if we can solve issues and attack problems really at the heart and where the impact is greatest, then we all receive the benefit of that, and that's where we really directed our efforts. That's why, again, we've intentionally located our facility here. We're looking really as economic development and education and community development as part of our business model, not just creating widgets.
I love hearing that. Some of the clients that we work with in my shop are thinking about that analysis. How far beyond just your HQ does your economic impact go, and who's participating? I love it.
Yeah, look, our industry, our state, our community, we are transforming ourselves, right? And we at AM, we're thinking about the different types of skill sets that we need to attract to the company. If we're not intentional, if we're not considering every single talent pool, no matter what diversity dimension we're talking about, we'd be competing at a disadvantage. And so when you ask how we're doing, our perspective over the last couple of years has been, let's take a long, hard look in the mirror. Let's understand that we have some gaps. We don't in all ways look like the communities in which we operate, particularly this community. And so, we set some goals. We're getting busy to set the programs and inclusion programs in place that will help everybody come to our business, feel welcome, appreciated, respected, and excel. And we have to attract talent from different pools in order, our business is different today, and it's going to be different 10 years from now than it is today.
That's great. Carla?
Yeah, we have to attract and we have to invite. People come where they feel welcome. We're all accustomed to if you build it, they will come, but who will come? The people who will come are the people who feel welcome coming. And a lot of times those are the people who have traditionally come. So how do we get the people who need to be personally invited, even cajoled? How do we get the people who are still have very light participation? I love the fact that this is the energy economy, because energy drives everything, but also everyone has energy and everyone has a part to play in the energy economy. So it is just so critical for us to make sure that people who have not historically felt welcome or invited for whatever reason feel that way now. Not just for them, but for us. We talk about a talent shortage. There is not a people shortage, and we can help train the people who are here now to do the things and even drive knowledge. We can drive an internal knowledge economy the same way we drive an external one. So I think this is a really exciting time because we are talking about inclusion and we are talking about equity as business conversations. Before they were social conversations. But now that we need all hands on deck, we now for the first time have the will, the technology, and the resources to create an equitable economy for the first time in the history of this country.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're really well positioned in this state. A lot of people know that I'm a climate person. We have certain advantages in this state, and so getting the equity and inclusion right in a place that's going to be relatively safe, I think, is a huge opportunity and not one to be glossed over. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to follow up with what Carla said in that, and for us, what we found, it's had to go beyond invitation and really developing efforts to go out, seek the talent. And as Carla said, when we look around our plant at what people have done and with the little they've had, and the type of innovation that we see just outside of our plant, we know there's talent there. But how do we develop and really intentionally, with effort, go after that talent, understanding that there are skill sets and opportunities for coaching and development that we need to bring to the table in order for that talent to really flourish and be a part of, this growing economy. And that really is, I think, a tremendous amount of untapped value that we've, not to spill the beans, but we feel that we've been able to have a competitive advantage on, and that innovation and that creativity is something that we can't teach with those students coming out of, some of our great universities, but we understand that there's a tremendous amount of value there if we can provide some skill sets.
That is extremely valuable. I spend a lot of my time mentoring, and I know a lot of you do as well. And one of the things I'm always saying to the students out there is, I'm going to tell you a bunch of great stuff, you're going to learn a bunch of great stuff, but you're going to learn everything you need to do your job on the job. Sort of like parenting, right? On the job training. I want to go back to a panel that was a little bit earlier. Tammy said something that I wrote down, and she talked about the word of mouth and how we all access our jobs now and use our networks now. And I am just going to be a provocateur and say, isn't that part of the problem? And how do we get the word out? If you're in the community, then people know you're there. Yeah. But if you're up I-75, people know you're there, but is that for me? And so I'm going to start at the other end of the table and ask just to reflect in terms of how do you get the word out? And I'm being really real because that's part of my jam. How do you get the message about your opportunities to the people that need to know it? Yeah. Carla, could you start?
It helps if you know some people that are different than you. I think that one of the things that we all have to be courageous about. Courage is a big theme for me as a hypersensitive introvert. We all have to be creative and courageous enough to go outside of our natural networks, because one of the things that I know Kamathi and I at least are accustomed to hearing is we can't find Black people who X. And my question is always, where did you look? And for the most part, people have looked where they have always looked. And that is not where, which are organic spaces, but they're not organic to the type of people they're looking for. So I think if we're courageous enough to just go and find the resources. One of the things that we did was Kamathi's, the founder of Dunamis Clean Energy Partners, Natalie King and I, and Q Johnson and Camille Terry and Will McCoy, 5 Black people who are in energy, electric vehicle infrastructure, formed BEVI, which is Blacks in Electric Vehicle Infrastructure. And we formed that to answer the question, where are the Blacks in electric vehicle infrastructure? Because we kept hearing there were none, and we're here. So again, just stepping out and making alliances that are not natural to your organic circles. And it's interesting because it's what we've had to do as Black people working in white environments, majority environments, our entire lives. But now we need our allies to really do that, to drive the inclusion that this economy needs.
Yeah, absolutely. From my perspective, Carrie, you have to be intentional. And you made a point that I think is right on. When I started with American Axle Manufacturing, the founder of our company said, hey, look, good, high-performing people, they know good, high-performing people. And we were challenged to go find, 4, 5, 6 people that that you can bring to the company that, you can help advance what we're doing. And that's how we built our team. Yes. And, it did end up, a lot of us coming from the same places, looking the same and that type of thing. It wasn't really intentionally exclusive, but it was unintentionally exclusive in some respects. And so, we recognize that, we see that, we understand that. And so we are now being intentional about building those alliances, reaching out, putting ourselves in places where we might not have been properly recruiting or considering in the past. And that's working out really well for us. And that's the only way it's going to happen, quite frankly, because we want to see that change. We understand the value in it. And there's no other way to do it but to do something different from what you've done before and reach out and build those bridges.
Yeah. It's easy to go to the traditional sources. We come out of the energy industry and the OEM industry and kind of sit ourselves right in the middle of that. And it's easy to go with the traditional sources. You're up against deadlines, you're up against cost and budgets. And, for your procurement team, whether you're, multinational corporation or a small mom and pop, who's the first person on my Rolodex? Who have I worked with before? We understand how easy it is to fall in that and I'll say fall into that trap, because it does become a trap in that you're again limited with respect to solutions, with respect to innovation and creativity, with just the same, tradition. And we've been able to find value in, expanding beyond that. I will, add to that by saying it takes investment. We all, including myself, we want to pay the smallest amount and attract somebody here. Hey, I have a salary, come to Michigan, work for me, and we'll make it all great. But in reality, we have to make investments for a longer and a broader ecosystem that doesn't just attract people here because we have a one-time bonus for you or something there, but they're attracted because Detroit and Metro Detroit and Michigan invest in their people. They're investing in their education. They're investing in people who are already there. It's one thing to bring in a whole new segment of people into the city and develop, new areas of the city. There's hundreds of thousands of people in the city. And what do we do with those people? How do we develop them? How are we able to include them in this larger and broader opportunity that we have to really grow and do some historic things as a nation?
Yeah, well, I'd love to go just down that rabbit hole and talk about, how does the message reach folks who need it, the hundreds of thousands of folks that aren't, in the downtown corridor?
It starts with companies in the community. It starts with intentionality and sourcing and investing in the community beyond just some of the traditional areas that we have. I love the comment earlier around bringing the universities into the community and the corporations into the community as all part of our state and not just a one-third type of state.
But not just at the university level, right? At the elementary school level, at the middle school level, at the job training organizations around this great city, around the entire infrastructure of people who care about developing talent. And that's where you have to be. And you have to be there, and you have to make that investment. And let me tell you something, that investment is a no-brainer. I spent over 30 years of my career in finance, and I can tell you right now, the investment in diversity, equity, inclusion, and particularly in the inclusion activities is a no-brainer. You know that diverse teams are more creative, they're more innovative. You know that diverse teams outperform lesser diverse teams. We know that people who work in environments where they feel welcome and that they belong, we know they're more productive, and productivity is the lifeblood of all profitability. So, it's a no-brainer to make that investment. We know it's good. It may not, show up in your demographics in the first month you do it, but you're going to see results if you invest in it. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest surprises, because the data has been out on the profitability of diversity for a very long time, and I think one of the biggest surprises as a business owner was that the economy didn't make that shift faster.
Yeah, right.
Because we do big things, we solve big problems, right? So when I first started reading articles about the business value of diversity, I naively expected there to be a much bigger drive for all types of diversity, as Kamathi said, not just ethnic diversity. And I shouldn't say just ethnic diversity because that's a really big thing, but all types of diversity. But we're here now. And the fact that the governor's Michigan Clean Energy, My Healthy Climate Plan, has the word equity written in it 17 times. The importance of that fact is that everyone is put on notice that equity is necessary for building a clean, green economy as we're spending trillions of dollars on it. So now that it's written 17 times, how do we activate that word? How do we really, truly drive equity in every decision, in every consideration, and not relegate our preconceived views of who belongs in what segment? As I said the other day, even if you're talking about carbon sequestration, you should still be thinking about what the equity play is. We can't just say that this is for laborers, for work, for jobs only. The average Black business owner has 12 times the median net worth of the average Black worker. So as important as jobs are, we have to give Black and brown people access to information that will allow them to align themselves with the business opportunities, the innovation opportunities to solve the gaps that are being created by this transition as well.
Absolutely.
Carrie, when we talk about investment, in 2021, less than 3% of VC dollars went to women founded and women-owned business. So when we're talking about investment and really that equity, and that's what we're talking about, right? The money, where's the money going? And what we'll find, there's also a huge attention, and maybe rightly so, of bringing people to Michigan and to Metro Detroit. When we talk about diversity, this is the largest Black city in the United States, not to mention the various immigrant populations and strongholds that we have here. And what you will find is we can attract people here, but the people, the businesses that are here and from here are going to invest back into their community, probably in a way that maybe another company from overseas or another part of the country may not. And I think that's a tremendous amount of value and potential energy that we have here to really unleash things that we've never seen before.
Unleash.
Yes.
Yes.
I love that idea.
Powerful resource.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. Glenn, if you're taking notes wherever you are, doing a deep dive workshop with some of these leaders who are having success driving their numbers up and diversifying their teams, I think that's a worthy cause. And I will go back to how do folks find out about these opportunities? How do they get trained? Can you guys maybe spend a couple minutes talking about what you're doing in-house to lift folks up as they come in, or retrain them, maybe in your case?
With us, we're working with as many of our community organizations as possible, whether it's Focus Hope, whether it's Wayne County Community College District. It's our other fellow entrepreneurs as we've, engaged in organizations like Bevy and the like, and hopefully, potential partnerships with American Axle. And how do we build out an ecosystem where we're collaborating, even if it's in a competitive way and competitive environment? So collectively, we can work to educate the community, educate really our whole state on the value and benefits of electrification and these mobility opportunities.
Yeah, I think, for us, we're really attacking this on two fronts. One is, where are we going to find the talent? And so we're building new relationships. We're fishing in new ponds, so to speak, to make sure that we are, as I said before, not at any disadvantage to any of our peers who are more diverse or more inclusive than we are. So that's a big part of how we're getting the word out and how we're attracting the right talent to the company. Once we have it, we are not completely changing, but we're shifting some of our development. The idea, you said earlier, we have to attract and retain. It's not enough just to attract. We want to attract and retain the best talent to really fulfill their complete ambition at our company. And so we're working on early career training programs. We're being very intentional about every diversity dimension and making sure that those people are representative, not just on our learning and development team, so that when we construct the programs that we're thinking about equity, we're thinking about things that are maybe not the traditional way that we've conducted our development programs in the past. And then we're also looking for outside help. And you mentioned Focus Hope. Wow, I mean, what a fantastic resource right here. Those types of organizations are out there and they're helping us.
Yeah, and the journey to equity, and it really is a journey. Again, Black people are woefully underrepresented in the energy industry. So it's easy for me to say we need to make sure we recruit more Black people into the industry. Black companies are more likely to serve Black families with honor in their organic environments. But one of the things we've done recently is we started talking and working with Michigan Rehabilitative Services, because the population of people living with disabilities have the lowest labor participation rate in the country. And especially since so many of us are working from home and have realized how much work can be done from home, we really need to reach into that community. Because if you have any other diversity category, if you identify as any other type of diversity, and you're living with a disability, that is compounding your lack of access to opportunity. So again, reaching past what we know organically and what we're comfortable with organically and saying, who is not at this table? And when we're having conversations and we're 5 white men or 5 Black women and we're talking about equity and diversity, we need to look at that table and think about who really should be having those conversations. I can't speak, for everyone. Each of us has a voice. Each of us represents a certain demographic. None of us can speak for everyone. None of us can do it all, but we can all do something to make sure the right people are engaged in conversations.
That's great. Well, we are coming down to our rapid fire time, but I'm going to impart with you one thought from a friend that my favorite person in town to argue with might be here. I can't see because of the lighting. But Chris Thomas, we're both advisors of at One, who you'll hear from next, often says we need to have more gumption as a state and really lean into our messaging. And I heard a lot of conversation today about how we talk about ourselves. And I don't think Chris is wrong. I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., and I'll just observe to you, folks on the coast still do consider this flyover territory, if you weren't tracking that, which I have a real big problem with. So since I have a microphone on, I wanted to share that with you. So we only have 30 seconds, so let me just maybe reflect, and you guys will tell me what I've missed. But we talked a lot about intentionality, which led us to talking about budget. We didn't get into public policy, but we talked a little bit about internal policies. Being attractive, and then I would say the flip side of that is how people find you. Are you for them? Can they access you? Do they think that you're for them? And so I just offer that to everybody to maybe think about. My word of 2022, asinine was like a couple years ago, but this year it's adjacency. And thinking about our adjacency and our proximity to diversity of all types and making sure that we are having these conversations everywhere we go. 0 minutes on the clock, so any final thoughts from the panel?
Well said.
We're good.
What a great group.
Thanks
Let's give them a
having us.
hand.
Mati.
Thank you.
Yeah, great to be with you. Carla, great to be with you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The next session of the program is sponsored by Walker Miller Energy Services. Please welcome the Vice President of Strategy, Policy, and Sustainability for Our Next Energy, Deanna Ahmed. And back to the stage, Glenn Stevens, Jr.
I was like, where's the clicker? Oh, Deanna has a clicker. So before we get going, you brought a video.
I did.
So can we roll the video, please? Such a great video. Such a great video. And you know it's a good video, like when you're in a concert and you can feel the bass. You know it's a... But we're going to take a pause and kind of step back and dissect the video a little bit, because you're going to give us a little 101 here on the company and some of the technology before we get into the discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Glenn, and thank you so much for having us here today. So I'm Deanna. I'm here from One, our Next Energy. We're an energy storage company that's headquartered here in Novi, Michigan, and we're working to solve three really important problems with respect to electric vehicle adoption. So we're focused on the doubling of range of EVs, because we know that in order to move the market, you need to give consumers what they are already experiencing in combustion engine vehicles. And by doubling the range of EVs, we can help to empower the electrification of larger platform vehicles and really cross the chasm and truly start to move mass market to an electrified future. We're also focused on safety, and in particular consumer safety. We're avoiding nickel and cobalt-based chemistries in order to mitigate the risks of thermal runaway, because when we put consumer safety at risk, then we hinder prospectively the movement and adoption of EVs. And finally, we've been focused on the development of a North American supply chain since the inception of the company, and we're in a really phenomenal ecosystem right now to be able to see that actually come to fruition. One was founded in July of 2020 by Mijibajaz, a veteran of the industry in Silicon Valley, but the company was brought back to Michigan, and we've been growing here ever since. You know, very briefly, we are bringing products to market. We did announce a $1.6 billion gigafactory here in the state of Michigan, and the products that we're working to bring to market really answer those three big problems that we are trying to solve. And so Aries 2 is an all lithium iron phosphate or iron-based chemistry, that battery pack that we're bringing to market. It's capable of delivering on range without risking safety, and by utilizing more and more sustainable materials, we're also reducing the embodied emissions of our products. Gemini is our flagship product and really is the reinvention of what a battery can be from a systems perspective. This architecture is pairing two chemistries, further minimizing the really important resources that are required from a mineral perspective that are needed to then double the range of an EV. And we're really excited about a development program with BMW where we'll demonstrate 600 miles of range using this battery technology in a BMW iX platform in early 2023. And finally, we announced in October this gigafactory, and this is going to allow us as an American battery company that's homegrown, without partnership, that is leveraging the expertise and ingenuity of leaders who actually helped to build battery technology over a decade ago, over 2 decades ago in the US. We're going to be manufacturing cells and packs domestically. This battery capacity is going to then service the mobility market. We hope to be partners with a variety of OEMs, and then we are also entering the stationary marketplace. And what I'm so excited about with respect to bringing this online is the over 2,000 jobs that we will bring by scale in 2027. And those are really important to the fabric of what we're trying to build here in Michigan, is these jobs, is this workforce, because we can't have the things that we want to make without the people. And I think that this is our biggest opportunity to bring American excellence back in the state of Michigan by bringing on a workforce that can, we invent it here and then we can make it here. So really excited to be with you here today.
Yeah, thanks. It is a great story unfolding. I had some questions, and then we got talking backstage, and I'm like, I don't need these. We're going to talk about something else, which we hopefully will have time to get to. But let's talk about this plant, because it's right there fresh in our minds. I suppose there was some competition from other places to get this plant located there. How did Michigan do? How did we do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we sent our request for proposals to 12 states and 1 Canadian province. Michigan did extremely well in terms of thinking about the competitive landscape. You know, initially we were really focused on a couple of core factors that were going to drive our decision. One, of course, being workforce. And Michigan, you know, with looking at our automotive manufacturing base, stood out well in that framework. Energy costs, of course, was important, and our partner in DTE Energy was able to service kind of being very competitive on that front. But then we were looking for a state that was motivated to grow energy storage in the grid. Our factory is going to be a grid-tied factory. We have an advanced manufacturing project we're working on called Gigafactory to Grid, where we will actually integrate energy storage into our manufacturing process when we're manufacturing cells. It's a novel idea. It's something that we're building proof of concept for right now. And we wanted a state that would be interested in seeing that vision and kind of the reinvention of what a battery factory can be at a systems level. And Michigan really did that, you know, through the My Healthy Climate Plan. We were looking out west in, you know, Nevada, Arizona, places where renewable energy penetration is able to be so high with respect to solar. But seeing those energy storage targets and then thinking about the opportunity to grow renewable energy here in Michigan to then power this next scale up of manufacturing, paired with proximity to North American supply chain, and finally, the commitment to projects like this with respect to the grant funding that we received.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of wonderful things that I think Michigan did to show us that we could really grow here in a partnership. And so we're really excited to be here. I'm looking out at Amanda, who was instrumental in that whole process.
Well, it is. This is a big win, but I think it's also a sea change of sorts. And I'll tell you why, because, listen, we beat ourselves up a lot about how we don't work together. And I've been in the other states. I've spent a lot of time in the southern states and in Ontario too. This was an example of, and it started with the bipartisan legislation at the beginning of this year to create the SOAR Fund. We wouldn't be having this conversation if that didn't happen. But it's carried forward where you'd had energy and education and workforce development, everybody at the table with the governor's administration to say, we're going to make this thing work. And I kind of feel like we did it right this time.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
We're excited about it.
Let's keep doing it.
Yeah.
But what I really want to talk about is get back to the base of why we're here today. And when I came out to your grand opening, and it was a beautiful big day, everybody was there, and it was just visually stunning. But I got a vibe about your company that I didn't know about, and that it was the culture. I mean, I felt it. I could see it. I mean, people generally were on the same page. People were, I know there's arguments and disagreements. Well, that's what families do. And that was the word that came to mind for me that day was family. And I'm right. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say the company was built from a family, like in the literal sense, and then in the not so literal sense, but it feels like it truly is a family. So Majib grew his career here in Michigan. He was at Ford for 16 years, built some amazing demonstrations of alternative energy vehicles, I think world's first plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, High Series Edge, built that program. And the group of people that was able to accomplish those programs was a really unique group of people. And when he founded the automotive division of A123 Systems here, that group of people kind of transitioned, and they helped to grow that infrastructure. And unfortunately, with the ecosystem and the time, with that program or that initiative, his career then led him to Apple, where he actually learned on the Silicon Valley mindset. But that group of people was always so important to him and his ability to accomplish really unique goals. And so in founding one during the pandemic, July of 2020, in Los Altos Hills, California, I was there because Majib is my dad. And so
I've known her for over a year, and I just found that out like recently. So I said, can we talk about that today? Because you kind of have an inside perspective on the founder of this company.
Yeah, and you know, the company was founded in July, and those first several months were virtual, and it was answering that question of could we solve doubling the range of EVs? And so it was PowerPoints and Zoom meetings and engineering, like what can we engineer? And that's where Gemini was born and Aries were born. And it was with that same group of people who at the phone call of, I think I'm gonna start an American battery company, were like, okay, we're ready to start this company. And so I joined formally about 6 months later when we were 15 people, and it started to feel like there was infrastructure and like a lift that needed to happen. I was finishing my PhD at Columbia, studying behavioral nutrition and neuroscience, and it was like, I think that you'll pay me better than my graduate school research right now. And I really saw the opportunity for impact because Majib is a person who really cares about impact. And I grew up working with him in so many ways. We've worked on human rights projects and advocacy. We built a hospital in Guatemala together. And in doing those projects, I've seen how he works, and I've also seen the way in which he's able to execute a vision. And I think he has a lot of people around him who resonate with that. And that leadership, I think, is what has allowed us to grow to almost 200 people. But we still feel like a family. And there's been so many of those connections. Our creative director, I met through my colleague Laura while I was doing my PhD. Laura is now also a part of the team. There's so many people who have come to the door through the door because they are impact-oriented, they want to make a difference, they want to solve problems, and they want to work in a great team. And we're really grateful to have been able to maintain that thus far.
Yeah, so that day I was out there, at the end of the day, and all the dignitaries had left, they took a family photo. And no, they literally took a 200-person family photo. And there wasn't anybody like, come on, get in the picture. No, they were all in. Like, there was nobody standing on the side, like, I don't want to be part of this picture. And I was watching. I got a good picture myself of all of you guys. And that's what kind of gave me that family vibe that day. That has to carry forward to the talent and the people that you have to acquire and attract to build this company. What's the secret sauce to do that at One?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it comes down to treating people well and valuing the hard work. You know, all of the milestones, we do quarterly milestones for our board, and they're always stretch goals, and it means that the last leg of the quarter is a lot of momentum to try to race to get really valuable things accomplished. And some are, and it's like building, you know, brick by brick. And what's really phenomenal is that everyone is working really hard towards that. And when you realize that the momentum of being able to have a factory that we're announcing, you know, we take possession of our facility in January, which is really profound. Actually, I've just stood in it a couple weeks ago. I was like, this is a really large building that we're gonna have a lot of people manufacturing goods here in Michigan, and it is by every single person's hard work, and so then you have to value that hard work. And so some of the things we do, I think, that people value are, you know, currently we have premium free healthcare for all of our workers. We have a really great PTO, family leave benefits. There is kind of that this is your family, you're working hard to build something, but you still are a human being, and your life and your family also matters. And we do these family get-togethers as well. We did a Halloween party. So I think it's about having that ecosystem of partnership between people who are innovating right now. That is really important. And I think Michigan's building that. And, you know, I grew up in Michigan. I left for about 10 years, and in coming back and seeing all of the momentum that's taken place over the past 10 years to create an ecosystem that would actually allow for that level of of partnership and collaboration. That's really exciting. And I think that young people want that. Young people really are focused on solving problems. Like, we have to decarbonize mobility because of climate change. And like, that's a big picture systems problem that requires so many people working together on a solution. And the mobility ecosystem that we're building here is really profound. So I would say that is important. You know, we have great community. We have a wonderful, you know, outdoor opportunities during the summer that I think people value. We have great places for people to raise families. And I think that what Michigan offers is truly unique. And we have an opportunity to retain the young people who are getting educated here right now, so people don't have to go away and come back and realize that this might be the best place to be raising a family, to be growing their careers, to be having impact in the work that they're doing. So we're excited to be a part of that.
Yeah, and you know, it's been mentioned a couple times today about the people that grow up here are going to stay here, but you got to give them a reason to stay here.
Yeah.
And that means we have to address the things we need to address. But we know we don't talk about them a lot. But when you talk about some of the other schools like Oakland U or Grand Valley State or Lawrence Tech, places like that, they're made up a lot of Michiganders, and the companies love them, and they want to stay here.
Yep. So
we can do that more, including with the community colleges. One of the things we talked about, you said, I'll refer to, we have to do things together, but Doug said it earlier, we were talking about it backstage, but we need to put a better foot forward to get together around some of this incredible sums of money that's available from the federal government.
Yep.
What do we need to do? Like, if you were in charge, if Governor Whitmer was sitting there, what do we need to do?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that is a huge opportunity right now in cell manufacturing in particular, battery manufacturing in particular, is to coordinate all of these efforts. There's a lot of very valuable efforts happening in the state of Michigan to strategize and then deploy resources and actually start to begin transitioning our workforce or building our workforce in this exact space. I think we need to come together as an industry, though, and look at some of the federal opportunities that are out there and seek a large amount of money to maybe be the battery manufacturing capital of the United States. You know, there's a lot of battery factories that have been announced across the U.S., but one of the things that we really resonated with when going through that economic development experience is that in the state of Michigan, there feels like there is a strategy that is working to create an ecosystem that could benefit, you know, 1 + 1 = 3. So if we actually, as an industry, come together and realize that training isn't proprietary, and so training can be collaborated on with, you know, industry partners all at the same exact table, I think we can bring federal dollars to the state of Michigan in order to, in a very big way, say, okay, we're going to start training people for these jobs. And we have to educate young people that these jobs are opportunities that they could benefit from and that they could have an upward trajectory within their careers, that, you know, this type of manufacturing is a new type of manufacturing. Clean tech manufacturing, it's about a little bit of programming, a little bit of statistics, understanding quality. It's very distinct from traditional automotive manufacturing in some ways that I think resonates with younger people. And then we have to pay attention to the workforce, incredible workforce that has existed here for a long time. If you come to our lobby at our headquarters, we have an EV history museum. And on our wall, we have the Anderson Electric car factory, which was the Russell facility right here in the city of Detroit, which made electric vehicles over 100 years ago. So we've been manufacturing for a long time. And so then part of it also is, I think if we, in a big way, step towards let's collaborate on workforce development as an industry with all of the groups that are working to strategize with the community colleges, like the Chamber, and congratulations on your funding today. But we need to bring equity into the picture as well. We need to ensure that we are bringing people, not bringing people opportunities, but like ensuring that the opportunities are accessible, because then we can benefit from that diversity in our workforce.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we got a couple seconds here, but I do want to bring back to something we talked about backstage, because a couple people have said today about books they've been reading, and I didn't know you had time to read with your little one and how much you do, but we were talking about books. So what are you reading, and is there a recommendation, and why?
What I'm reading right now, I read before. I'm reading 2 books, actually. I was just on my first vacation in 2 years, which was great. So I'm reading Hawaii by James Michener, and
wow.
that was really fun to read while in Hawaii. But I'm also reading, for like the 3rd time, Thinking in Systems, a primer by Donella Meadows. And I think, like, you know, my career and background has been a little bit focused on systems change research, and I think what we're doing here in the state is changing a lot of systems at the same time. So I've been just thinking about that framework, and I actually highly recommend that book. It's a great book.
Okay. Well, please join me in thanking Deanna for joining us today. Thanks, Deanna.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much. There you go.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up here now that we're back. I would have wrapped it up really quick if we weren't back with power. So let me kind of try to put a little bit of a bow on the day. And the first thing I'm going to do is thank everybody. And one more round of applause for everybody that spoke today and shared their thoughts. We tried to build something a little different today, and I feel like we did, so we hope you felt like that too. So thank you to everybody. I know now at this point I'm preaching to the choir, but our belief, and I think most of your belief, is that our future is going to be enabled by high-tech talent and digital talent and people that are really going to be able to have those knowledge-based jobs, as well as protecting our advanced manufacturing jobs. Whether it's startups, electrification, software, Industry 4.0, and Travis touched on this a little bit, this booming outdoor rec tech industry, which I can assure you're going to hear more about. It's all going to be driven by people, right? And on this stage, on Monday, I was here for the Automotive News Congress, and Casey Crane was interviewing Jim Farley, and he said, quote unquote, he asked him about what's the progress of the train station. Now, if you haven't driven over there recently, it's incredible. I mean, to see what is happening there, and you know, it's getting close, real close. But Jim Farley said the role there, Michigan Central, is to get really good software people. He talked about a lot of other things, but that was the first point he made. So let's remember that. I want to thank also everybody that came together to help us realize what the governor announced today. Because all of these different organizations, you see these logos here, every single one of them, for about the past year and a half, we have convened on a regular basis to help shape and inform our work to where we could say we can put some definitive plans together. And we have. We have not been waiting for today. We've been working on today. And Drew Coleman is leading this with our teams. We just hired a new person that's going to join us to help facilitate this. We have 4 very specific work streams that you're going to hear more about, and many of you are already engaged in it, will be engaged in it. And we have 1 year. This is not something that's going to go on. We are working on this in a period of 1 year to deliver some results on pilots and to move the needle on some things with regards to developing some information. Another busy slide, but I have to share with you that we're not the only ones doing things. We keep a landscape. They're almost all here, but there are a lot of initiatives and organizations that are working on what I would consider to be mobility, electrification, e-mobility, cyber, and they're all here. There's a couple that aren't here yet, but we all met yesterday. Almost everybody that's on that logo, those logos, was on the phone with us yesterday, not everybody. The point I make about putting this slide up is that we're all talking to each other, because if we're not using the precious funds we have right now, we're not leveraging our resources, and we're going to step on our toes, and we're not going to produce results. So I'm happy to say that different places and spaces around the state that are working on the same thing are talking to each other. So I want to thank everybody that's involved in that, and we're going to get all these groups together in January to do a kind of an analysis on where we're at. So last slide is just to say thank you to everybody for being here today. In particular, there's 2 platforms you heard about. One was Let's Detroit. The other is Hello West Michigan. I know Rachel's here from Hello West Michigan. We're very committed to the communities and the places and the spaces that people want to live in. And again, advanced manufacturing is important, and the development of our tech talent in strong communities that people want to live, that are diverse, inclusive, and in a welcoming state. I know it's all sounds like sound bites, but it's what we have to take home every night, and the work that we do has to be driven by it. So that's it. We actually set a date for next year for this event, and it's going to be in December of next year. And happy holidays, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. Be safe.
This concludes the program. Thank you for attending the 2022 MICHauto Summit.
Opportunity here in Michigan is really about the people.
People here want to work hard, they want to win, and they're used to creating industries that change the world.
From engineering talent to marketing talent, these are hard workers that are, hungry to innovate.
There is just an ethic of hard work that says we can kind of deal with anything.
The kind of teams that we build here and the kind of people that we find here are folks that are in it for the long haul.
Faurecia and Hella, two automotive leaders, have come together. Stronger. We are much more than a global leader. We inspire the future of mobility.